across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for your company. I'm absolutely serious, by the way. I do want to know, what do you think Mike Graham's going to get me for Valentine's Day? Keep it clean, people. Keep it clean. I'd love to hear from you today, but most thing I want to talk about today is, I'm afraid, Ukraine. I am absolutely despairing at Donald Trump selling out to Ukraine as he appears to have done. Oh, there may be some clever method in his madness. We shall, of course, wait and see. But I always knew, and I said, on balance, I'd vote for Trump over the utterly useless Kamala Harris. I thought Trump was absolutely sound in Israel, but I always said, but he's not right on Ukraine. But I held out a hope that Donald Trump might actually see sense on Ukraine and understand the existential significance for Western civilization of defending a democracy in its sovereign territory from an authoritarian dictator like Putin. But I kind of forgot just how close Donald Trump is to Vladimir Putin, isn't he? Well, they had that 90-minute phone call yesterday, and it does look like, well, those peace talks are going to start. Peace talks, that's great. I mean, we are seeing carnage on the battlefields and in the towns and cities of Ukraine. We have seen millions of people displaced, hundreds of thousands of deaths, absolutely just horrific war. But the terms on which it's going to be negotiated, it seems to me, are all going to be on Vladimir Putin's terms. When Donald Trump talks about being a strong man, well, hate to tell you, mate, you're looking pretty weak today. You're definitely looking like you're under Vladimir Putin's thumb on that long white table he likes to sit at. Because when your Secretary of State, Peter Hegseth, so basically says, yeah, no NATO membership for Ukraine and no realistic chance of returning to not just 2022 borders, but pre-2014 borders. That includes Crimea, as well as the Donbass, the eastern region of Ukraine. You've basically given away all your negotiation positions, have you not, already, before you've even started those talks? I'm surprised to be on the side of our Defence Secretary here in the UK, pointing out that there can be no peace talks without Ukraine and Zelensky being involved. I'd love to know your thoughts, though, because it seems to me that this is a betrayal of Ukraine. Do you think it's a betrayal of Ukraine? Tell us why you think it is. Tell us why you think it's not. I'd love to hear whether you think that Vladimir Putin has played a blinder here, whether Donald Trump is doing the right thing just to end the carnage. Is that better than anything else? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Please give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK to 87222. You can also send us a message on X at Talk TV. And don't forget, of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1 standard network rate message. And, of course, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device, it's great to have you on board. But I do want to hear from you as well. This is as much your show as it is mine. We are also going to be talking about the latest mad migrant approvals for staying in this country. As a Nigerian woman, as Mike Graham was talking about this morning, tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in Britain. By the way, once she's failed, I don't know, let's go twice. Can we throw her out? Can we literally throw her out? We know where Nigeria is. There are plenty of planes there. But she finally was granted the right to stay in this country because she joined a terrorist group just to boost her claims. So then argue, I'm part of this group and therefore I can't go back to Nigeria. This is mind-blowing stuff. This is genuinely insane. Plus, we're going to be talking to Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice as they promise to scrap net zero, yay, and indeed place a windfall tax on renewable energy firms if they win the next election. Well, that will set the cat among the pigeons, won't it? Plus, small matter of our economy and how it's doing. Remember all that growth we were promised? Remember that? Well, this morning, the latest figures on UK's GDP showed that in the final quarter of last year, so October, November, December, we saw growth of, guess what, 0.1%. I mean, yay, not in recession. Well done, everybody. However, given that our population grew by 0.2%, give or take, per head of the population, we're actually poorer. I know. Anyway, we'll be talking about all of that. I do want to hear from you. So much to talk about. And I'm so thrilled today. I mean, it's almost like you plan the news sometimes. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, joins us right now. Very, very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you. You don't know how much it cost me to get this news plan.
I mean, you're in charge of the international news grid, are you not? No, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, whether it comes to our economy, whether it comes to, the future spending, future tax in this country, ability to pay for the NHS, you name it, every single thing comes down to, are we going to have to fight a war in the near future? Yeah. Now, a lot of people will be saying, well, you know what, Ukraine had such a massive impact on economy. I mean, almost as much as lockdown policies did in terms of the energy price hike and the cost, of helping Ukraine and the impact, all that as well. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, going to war is very expensive. Mm-hmm. Planning for war is very expensive. Mm-hmm. Avoiding war is an absolute vital thing to do wherever you can. Has Donald Trump just avoided World War III by starting these peace talks with Vladimir Putin, allowing him to come in from the cold and trying to get the carnage to end? Or has he made World War III more likely?
With what has come out publicly at the moment, World War III is significantly more likely. And
interesting proviso, what has come out publicly?
Because what we're doing is we're analysing this from a 2D perspective. This is a 3D, but more likely 4D, 5D or 6D game of chess that's going on. And it's very difficult to work out exactly where the different manoeuvrings are that are happening. And it's on a global basis. Xi Jinping will be, America's worried about Southeast Asia. If Ukraine is forced to give up territory permanently to Russia because of Putin's illegal reinvasion 3 years ago, Xi Jinping will go, well, I can hang out for 3 years if I take Taiwan. So he will go for Taiwan.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a global conflict.
You and I have been talking about it for a very long time. And although US have made it very clear that Europe is no longer their particular area of interest, Asia absolutely is.
Exactly.
And that's the key thing here. Volodymyr Zelensky has been very clear that he wants to hold on to all territory. Once Donald Trump was elected, there was a lot of making nicey, congratulatory tweets and the like. He knows the score and he knows how to. I think he's operated very well with him. But when we saw Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of State, announce that basically, look, there can't be any membership of NATO. Realistically, that would be vetoed by the likes of Turkey anyway. Yeah. I mean, that realistically wouldn't happen anyway. But bearing in mind, I mean, when was it 1994, when Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, they were given a guarantee of their sovereign national territory by America and the UK. And Russia. Yes. And Russia, by the way. We people say it's not our problem. No, we made it our problem. We agreed to do that. Now, my trouble with US, and again, you think, like, with Trump so much worse than Biden, he'll go to the table. At the end of the day, even under Joe Biden, and certainly would have been under Kamala Harris, just enough aid for Ukraine, just in time, each time, to stop them from losing, but never enough to help them win. If the US and Europe wanted or were willing to do what was right to make sure Ukraine had won, would win, they could win. End of. They could have sent the jets. They could have done it. They didn't.
Yeah, there's so much to this. With what Pete Hegseth, I can never pronounce his name.
Hegseth, I know. Why
can't we have politicians who's got names we can pronounce on wars in countries where we can pronounce where the countries are and all the rest of it? But no, what he said is from a tactical perspective. Nobody can win in the tactical fight that's going on. Yeah. Russia's economy is collapsing. That's in military planning terms what we call at the operational level, and that could lead to Russia's collapse completely. Yeah. On one hand, we go, that's brilliant. We get rid of Putin. If Russia collapses and Putin collapses and they lose control of the federation of Russian states together, then the whole federation could collapse. That would make the breakup of Yugoslavia seem like a Sunday school picnic, and because we've got this whole of Russia falling apart with lots of little states which have got nuclear weapons because they're based in there, that could then stimulate a conflict. So something trying to keep a degree of control over the here and now is one of the potential solutions that could be looking at. I don't know whether that's the logic that Trump has applied or his team has applied. Yep. But he seems to be, on the surface of it, regurgitating what Zelensky's plan was, or elements of Zelensky's plan that he presented to Trump before he got inaugurated, where Zelensky had proposed NATO membership, security guarantees, because of NATO membership beyond what was in the Minsk agreements beforehand, and allow Russia to keep the territory that it had captured so far, but Zelensky would have a plan to get that back through diplomatic means.
Well, basically everything's predicated on let's just wait for Putin to die, or actually, as various Ukrainian commentators have pointed out, the Russian Empire collapsed, the Soviet Union collapsed. There are some sort of internal fractures that mean that these sort of countries do collapse. As we saw, remember, we saw the forces aiming to oust Vladimir Putin, a Wagner group, and I mean the Russian army just went, on you go, take a right at the next junction. That's the way to Moscow. I mean, look. That it is very fragile. But I'm genuinely, I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. I think we are in Neville Chamberlain waving a white piece of paper in 1938 territory. I think people are crazy to think, And again, very, very simple. That advice, speak softly, carry a big stick. Yeah. We shout loudly and we don't even bother with the stick. Yeah. We don't understand that we're not willing. But again, if we'd been invaded by Russia, we would have run out of munitions within 3 days. But we're not in a position to defend ourselves properly. We're certainly not in a position to defend other countries. What happens next? So the message goes out not just to Xi Jinping, to the mullahs in Tehran, to everybody else. The message of Kim Jong-un, the message goes out to Vladimir Putin loud and clear. There you go. It is your sphere of influence. Take what you want. Here's the buffet. Which part of Eastern Europe do you want? Eastern Europe do you want? You're looking at Moldova. You're looking at Georgia. You're looking at Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. NATO members surrounded by Moscow, by Russia, surrounded by Russia. Yeah. Now, would he be brave enough? You know what? I think he is, because I think he doesn't think that we would actually come to their aid, and I don't think we would. Yeah,
he also thinks in longer terms. So he will regenerate his military capability in 5 years, and he will have an ambition for 5 years' time, or set it up for a successor, because some of those that could replace him are worse. Now, when we bring it back to money terms, because a lot of this goes around Trump's bit on money. 2% of GDP is what NATO members have signed up for. Not all NATO members are doing that. The UK is looking at 2.5% of GDP at some stage when the Strategic Defence Review comes out. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, had said 3% should be the ambition for all NATO members, and Pete Hegseth said 5%, and Trump has said 5%.
But even the Americans
don't even spend that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the solution that we are anticipating that could come out of this, we'll see a new Cold War. During the last Cold War, we were spending 6 to 7 to 8% of our GDP on defence. And if we get into a shooting war, you forget about percentages. Everything is focused on defence and defending our country. So now is a time for Europe in particular, and the UK from a leadership perspective, to step up and start to make plans to spend more.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I want to hear from you. You may completely disagree with both of us. I mean, again, we're actually slightly different business. You're a bit more optimistic than I am. I am really not optimistic at all. But I do want to hear from you. Is this basically a betrayal of Ukraine? Tell us what you think, yes or no, and tell us why. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Just going to view some breaking news in the last few moments. There's a major police operation underway in Munich after a car struck pedestrians in the German city. According to the German tabloid newspaper Bild, the car was driven directly into pedestrians. Some 15 people are known to be injured. We don't know if there are any deaths. We certainly hope there are not. The driver has been secured on site, German police have said, and currently poses no further danger. Oh, gosh, goodness me. All those mental health problems in Germany.
And we've got the Munich Security Conference coming up at the end of this week. Yep. So everyone's on heightened alert for this sort of activity.
Yeah, exactly. But again, no, it'll be mental health. It's amazing how much mental health has gone down in the last few years, isn't it? Anyway, 10:16 is the time. Also some breaking news actually about Hamas. They've said they do not want the hostage and ceasefire deal to collapse. No, I bet you don't. You little murdering, raping terrorists. Palestinian sources have reported that progress in efforts to save the agreement. They say the terror group told mediators it will free hostages on Saturday. They say if Israel honours its commitment. It was them that said they weren't going to release any hostages. The three men due to be released. But then there was some US and Israel talking about all the hostages need to be released on Saturday. I don't think anyone really realistically thought that was going to happen. But going back to the three, I think if you're the families of those three men, I mean, you'll take it. And given the condition of the three who were released last Saturday, even more urgency now. Let me also talk about GDP. Up 0.1%, but our population is also up. Per capita has gone down. Yeah. I mean, it's just, this is basic stuff. The figures are better than they could have been.
Yes.
We're not actually in recession. Oh, well done. December wasn't as bad as everyone thought it would be. As we know, these figures are not only, the predictions are nearly always wrong. When we do get the figures, they are guesstimates, and then they're revised later. Yeah. So these figures will change 15 times anyway. We're flatlining.
We're completely flatlining, and the whole of the government's policy is predicated on a growth of over 2.5%. So
good luck with that.
Let's see the Chancellor try and celebrate this tiny little 0.2% growth. That doesn't meet any of the plans. And then we've got the OBRs that turned around and said that because of the economic position that our budget has put us in, it's wiped out all of the headroom.
The extra cost of the interest on our loans.
Exactly. It's wiped out all of the headroom that she'd calculated in to her previous budget. So she's going to have to either cut spending or put taxes up, or probably both, because they'll want to keep giving the money to all these silly projects.
It's all going terribly well. Meanwhile, let's just keep importing people. This extraordinary story about this Nigerian lady. I do apologise. I've literally had this cough forever now. It's forever now. Apologies. Nigerian woman, she tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in Britain. She finally granted the right to stay after joining a terrorist group. Basically, it's a terrorist group. So basically, I can't go back to Nigeria because I've been a member of this group. I mean, she only joined it. I mean, the tribunal was even aware of that. But she's got the right to stay in this country. I mean, this is insane. Oh,
completely insane. You're the People of Biafra Group. It's not a prescribed organisation in the UK.
But it is in lots of other countries.
It is in the across lots of other countries, and in particular Nigeria.
But the BBC called them terrorists because they have difficulty, don't they?
Oh, good grief, no, because it's not prescribed in this country. It won't
even when it is.
It won't call terrorist groups that are prescribed in this country terrorists. She joined that to further her asylum. She should have been out.
I mean, again, first
refusal.
I know this is the bit I don't get. You could appeal from Nigeria, love. I mean, we've also got Keir Starmer. This was raised at PMQs yesterday about this migrant family in Liverpool. They're not migrant. They're in Gaza. 2 parents, 4 kids, and they've applied under the Ukraine family scheme, clue in their name, to arrive here from as Palestinian migrants, and they've been allowed under exceptional circumstances. I don't know what the exceptional circumstances are because they're the same circumstances of 1.8 million people in Gaza. Keir Starmer did say that the judge who'd granted that had made the wrong decision. Now, what's interesting is he often says he can't comment on any judicial decisions. He doesn't want to. Okay, you don't prejudice anything in advance, but you just simply can't comment on it. But there he is saying it's the wrong decision. Labour have definitely got to grips with the idea now that the British people are not going to put up with this madness anymore. Do you have any faith in their ability to do anything about it?
None whatsoever, and it's absolutely crazy. And there's something rotten at the heart of our judiciary whenever you look at a lot of the rulings that are coming out at the minute. And this one is... It's
same as chiefs of police as well, the College of Policing. They have been utterly captured.
And this is just wrong. The terrorist threat that would come from individuals coming in from Gaza into this country is phenomenal.
Not a single person. Not a single person.
Yeah, large proportions of the people are very closely related to Hamas. They will increase the terrorist threat.
In Hamas. Yes, the children have been radicalised. Now, I'm really sorry that's happened to them. I don't see why it should be our problem. I really don't. 10:20 is the time. I want to hear from you. I mean, on any of the topics we're talking about. Do you want to be celebrating the 0.1% of growth? Go on, let's have a little party and all join in. But I particularly want to hear from you on Ukraine. Has Donald Trump sold out Ukraine, as many of us feared he would? Give us a call 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Donald Trump had 2 goes. He sort of worked out...
The second go seems to be going
over
better
his
than
first
the
term.
go.
And the second term, he had 3,500 people ready to go. Look at the amount of taxpayer money that's being spunked up against the wall.
Yeah.
They're going to cut that off. They're going to stop it. They're going to make sure that's redirected into what I would call as a vibrant, accountable private sector.
Yeah. One shot.
That's what we need.
4 years. One shot, 4 years. Nigel Farage, is he going to be the Prime Minister, yes or no?
Well, at the moment, he's got every chance of being the Prime Minister. I mean, we're leading the polls and he's leading reform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Philip Ingram still with me, of course. 10:24 is the time. Let's go straight to your calls and your messages. Lots coming in about Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin. They've had a 90-minute phone call. They're going to begin talks to end the war in Ukraine. But Russia would keep their captured territory. Ukraine would not join NATO. No US forces on the ground at all to protect Ukraine. This is a betrayal of Ukraine. What was the point? What was the point of the last almost 3 years? Tell us what you think. Let's go to some of your messages. Dan says, depends if Ukraine agrees. If they don't, then Trump is Chamberlain waving a piece of paper, shouting peace in our time. Exactly. Gareth says, no, to strike peace, there must be a negotiation. NATO made a deal with the Russian Federation at its inception at the end of the Soviet Union and didn't honour it. I mean, I'm sorry. This idea we've made like these promises to Russia, I mean, give me a break. Russia breaks every promise. Brian says this deal also pulls Russia away from China, further isolating China. Russia is rogue and we'd rather they didn't work closer with China and Iran. I think it does the exact opposite, actually. I think it does the exact opposite. Harry says, no, it's common sense and the war needs to end. But again, is that not kind of up to the Ukrainian people? I'm wondering, I always have to think, Philip, would we agree to such a deal if it was us? And which part of Britain? Again, lots of people then joke, oh, I'd give away London or Norfolk or Liverpool or wherever, yeah, ha ha. Realistically, given what's happened, would you say all our, a load of our cities had been flattened, say that people have been bombed to smithereens, tens and tens and tens of thousands of our men on the front line had been blown to bits, our children had been basically kidnapped and taken away to Russia and not returned. That was going. Are you really saying you'd go? Yeah. We'll give up. We'll give up a massive part of our territory, and we'll just carry on like that. Are you telling me you would do that? Because I don't think you would. Would you, Philip?
No, I wouldn't at all, but Keir Starmer's...
I'd fight to the death at that point.
Keir Starmer's going to give away parts of the UK by stealth. He's giving votes to 16-year-old. They tend to be more radical, so you'll find that there'll be more votes for SNP and independents, there'll be more votes for Sinn Féin and Northern Ireland.
No, that's democracy. No, I don't agree with votes for children, full stop. I don't know, let's call it what it is, votes for children, that's what they are. But anything that happens via democracy, I'm into self-determination. I have no issue with that.
16-year-olds as children, and you're bringing that in for the sole reason of trying to get more votes for you in one particular part.
Oh, I know. It's totally dodgy.
So
I completely agree with you.
I don't trust our government.
But it's not the same as giving up your territory to a murderous invading force. Let's go to the phone lines. Paul is in Essex. Hello, Paul. What do you want to say?
Oh, hello, Julia.
Oh, Paula. I do apologise, Paula. Hello, Paula.
Yeah. Oh, well, hello.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, look, I know a lot about Crimea and I know a lot about Russia.
Yeah.
Having studied it for the last 60-odd years.
Right.
And I have friends in Crimea. I feel very sorry for them. They are not under threat at the moment because it was an autonomous republic. They voted out of Ukraine. The reason why
you say that
Ukraine, it was a deal done in '91. Because the Ukraine was made a Soviet Socialist Republic by Khrushchev, who did it on a whim. They were then stuck with it. And in '91, when the Soviet Union broke down, they were kind of parceling out wherever they wanted. And Crimea particularly did not want to go. And also, I'd like to point out, that Russia have been paying Ukraine for the port of Sevastopol, which is where the Black Sea fleet is. They've been paying since 91.
Yeah, what's that relevant to?
Well, it's relevant to the fact that none of these things that were done have really come home to roost now.
Okay, look, here's the thing, Paula. I don't think you need to go back all those years, because we had an independent, sovereign, democratic nation state with a lot of failings and a lot of faults, a lot of corruption. Yeah, as most former Soviet Union, Soviet bloc countries are afflicted by that, because you didn't function without that. Being invaded by a hostile nation state that basically says we don't recognise your existence, that's all you need to know. Full stop.
No,
it is all you need to know.
Zelensky gained his position by an illegal coup.
Oh my goodness! It was a democratic election. That's just. I'm sorry. With all due respect, Paula, you've been reading too much on the darker regions of the internet. There's a difference between, we can disagree on opinion, but what you're stating isn't a fact.
Well, I'm sorry, but it was an illegal coup, and
well, all coups are illegal. He was elected. He was elected by the Ukrainian people.
No,
he was. That's a fact.
May have been altered. Yes. What happened to Yanukovych then? Yanukovych was overthrown. Poroshenko took his place.
Zelensky was elected in a democratic election. Paula, I'm going to move on, because I think we're just going to go round and round in circles. I want to talk about the future of Ukraine rather than... Again, Philip, very briefly.
There's a geographic reason why Crimea is linked to Ukraine, in that Crimea can't support itself from water and access into the mainland. That's why Putin built the bridge, the Kursk, but it still relies on water. Basic necessities to support Ukraine, support Crimea coming from Ukraine. That's why it's part of Ukraine.
Yeah, indeed. David, let's go to you on the line. He's in Exeter. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia and Philip. Sterling work you're both doing. I want to highlight something Pete Hesker said yesterday. Well, there were two things. Firstly was that he wanted our democratic leaders in Europe to go back to their people and tell them the truth. And secondly, it was, you need to step up.
Yeah.
And I think we would both agree that, yes, the truth is very important, and we need, in all the countries in Europe, need to step up with what they're doing with defence investment and rearming.
Yeah.
And I think that's a shrewd move, because if the talks fail, the shooting war will carry on.
Yeah. And
the salient points he was making are very, very valid. It's been going on for 3 years, and I think right from the outset, when Ben Wallace intervened with the N-laws and pushed back the blitzkrieg. But what we've not seen with our own defence policy, regardless of the Conservative or Labour government, against military officer advice, is to start rearming. And we should have been rearming years ago when all of this analysis was in the MOD.
Yeah.
And I've sat in Defence Committee numerous times with senior officers going, what is the government doing? It's asleep at the wheel. We need to start rearming.
Yeah, and when everyone says it's going to cost too much, I tell you what, trying to rearm when we actually, the point of war, is going to cost a damn sight more.
Correct. This is absolutely this is what he was saying, and I think what we can take away from this is Europe has been asleep at the wheel. This policy that they've had in Europe of we can all cut and reduce our defence and we can go in as a collective hasn't worked. That policy has clearly failed. And we need to rearm and rearm quick. But, and this is the but, what is Starmer doing? Is he going to tell us the truth, which is we've been at war with Russia for quite some time, but that's everything other than the shooting?
Yeah.
And we need to rearm, and it's going to have to be, well, we're going to have to take money from other budgets and put it into
or put taxes up. We can't borrow much more. Exactly. That's the reality. I don't think they're going to do it. That's my biggest worry. David, so appreciate your call. Thank you for that. Very quick word from Philip.
David's hit the nail on the head, but Europe, and the UK included, has been freeloading of the United States for protection since
and America's basically said, we're done now.
America's now said, we're done.
Think perfectly reasonably, actually.
Yes, and there are 3 conflicts around the world. We can't ask them to look at all 3, and therefore it's asking Europe to step up and look after the one on the European continent.
Absolutely. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Time now, though, to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice about their plans to scrap net zero and even tax renewable energy. What's that going to do? We'll talk about all that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Lots of your calls still coming. We'll get to more of those. 0344 499 1000 about Ukraine and whether or not Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are having talks is basically betrayal of Ukraine. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Philip Ingram is still with me. I'm delighted to say we've been joined in the studio by Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK and an MP, of course. Very good morning.
Very good morning.
Always very good to see you. Do want to get your thoughts, just very briefly, actually, on Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin beginning these talks on Ukraine. Is it a betrayal of Ukraine?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a recognition that most wars end up with some form of negotiation.
Most wars end with one side winning, actually.
Well, no, that's not the case.
That is the case.
No, most wars end up with some form of negotiation to try and stop killing people, and I think it's...
No, they have a negotiation of talks after one side has won.
Perfectly reasonable for a new president to come in and say, we've actually got to... We've got to stop trying killing people and the devastation and destruction, and see whether or not some form of negotiation can work for everybody.
A negotiation where he's basically given away exactly what Donald Trump, what Putin wants. So you're going to have Crimea, you're going to have the Donbass. Ukraine's not going to be allowed to join NATO. What else does Putin want?
Who's doing the negotiating? President Zelensky alongside Donald Trump, or you? The answer is...
It'd be better if I did it.
Maybe not. But at the end of the day, someone's got to start a negotiation, And
why? Why does someone have to start negotiating? Why don't we just give them enough weaponry so that Ukraine can win and defend?
Because we haven't got.
I thought you in Reform cared about national sovereignty and borders. You think borders matter, just not for Ukraine, one of our allies.
No, that's not the point at all. But at the end
Isn't
of
it?
there's no point trying to pretend that you can give weapons when we haven't got the weapons. You can't pretend you can give the money if we haven't got the money. That's the reality, Julia, whether people like it or not. At some point, someone's got to have the courage to say, we've got to stop killing people. What Ukraine has done...
We're not killing people.
What Ukraine has done with our support is get themselves into a position where Russia clearly realises it cannot win. So at some point, someone's got to say, we've got to stop this. How are we going to stop it? Where's the negotiation? Okay. All of that is to play for. But the idea that you never negotiate, you just carry on writing cheques and carry on killing people, cannot last forever.
It's Russia that's killing people. If Russia stopped fighting, if Russia wanted to end the war, if Russia stopped fighting, Russia could just stop fighting. There wouldn't be a war. No one would be killed.
And that would be great.
Hey, our job done.
Yeah,
why doesn't the West take that to Russia?
Ultimately, maybe that's what the negotiations are.
Which part of Britain would you give away if we were invaded and you wanted to negotiate peace?
None at all.
Oh, so we wouldn't give away any of Britain.
But
it's okay to give away a bit of Ukraine.
Hang on, it's not us giving it away, Julia. Right? It's Ukraine, and
Ukraine doesn't want to give it away.
Of course it doesn't. But ultimately, as everybody said, it is Zelensky's decision. But ultimately, we've got to stop killing people.
If we were invaded and our close allies in NATO, like the United States, basically supported us for a bit, but gave us just enough support so we could actually not lose, but we'd not enough to win. Yeah. And after 3 years, whoever was president of the United States said,
from which to try and negotiate a solution.
So at which point Donald Trump, says, oh, well, we're going to have a negotiation, but we're going to let the Russians, whoever invaded us, keep part of territory. Just to clarify, just how much of British territory would you be willing to give away in those negotiations?
On Northern Ireland, chap. Ultimately, in Northern Ireland, there was a negotiation to stop the killing. It involved horrendous compromises that lots of people didn't want to make.
We didn't give away territory.
We stopped killing people.
We didn't give away territory.
That's also correct.
We didn't give away territory to the invading force. That's a ridiculous analogy.
No, it's a completely valid analogy.
Sorry, who invaded Northern Ireland?
Wars stop when people stop killing people.
No, wars stop when one side is defeated.
Look.
Sorry, have you heard of the Second World War?
Yes.
Did we negotiate the ending of the Second World War?
Have you heard of there are lots of other wars where ultimately people negotiate a peace. Otherwise, you just carry on. How long are we going to carry on with this?
Falklands.
Yeah, Falklands we won.
Oh, yeah. We didn't just negotiate with Argentina and give them some of the Falklands.
No, but there's plenty of other...
Why not? That would have stopped the war, Richard. Why not?
Look, ultimately, we won that war, but there are other wars where it's a negotiated settlement.
Because it's not our problem. Except it will be our problem when Vladimir Putin thinks he can take any territory of any country in Europe that he darn well pleases.
And that's why the negotiation is about what is the strength of what is put in place to stop him going any further. That's why I've always said...
What's going to stop him going any further? We've just said you can take Crimea, you can take the Donbass.
That's the whole point of the negotiation. Is Ukraine going to join NATO and therefore benefit from the Article 4? Well, that's the point of the negotiation.
Well, there's no negotiation, is it? Is there? There's no negotiation. The Secretary of State
clearly don't understand how President Trump works. He starts out in one position. That doesn't mean that's where he settles. The whole point of a negotiation, you set out positions and then you work out where you're going to finish.
You know what you don't do in a negotiation? You set out a position where you've given the other side everything that they want.
And that's not what I suspect.
It's literally what they've done in the last 24 hours.
I completely disagree.
I just thought Reform cared about national borders.
We do absolutely care about national borders and sovereignty.
Not all of them. Okay.
But equally, we don't want to carry on killing people. We're not killing people. But ultimately, somehow, the war has got to stop. It's gone on for 3 years. How long do we keep it going? A decade? 2 decades?
How long would you fight for this country?
Until I'm dead.
Well, exactly. That's what the Ukrainian people would ideally do if they were given support.
But
that war could have been won a long time ago if we'd given support.
Yeah, but there are lots of Ukrainian people who would like to find a way to end this war, including the president.
Let's not use up all our time on this. I'm disappointed in people who believe in national security.
Trying to explore ways to stop killing people.
Well, tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people. Then we can solve that problem like that. Now let's talk about what Reform UK I want to talk about today, which is placing a windfall tax on wind and solar farms if you did win office, scrapping net stupid zero. Now you know I'm with you 100% on the net zero issue. You're the only major party that's actually ever been talking about scrapping net zero. Kemi Badenoch in recent interviews still talking about maybe it's the date that's the problem rather than the actual policy itself, which is, I think you and I both agreed, utterly insane and unachievable and unaffordable. How does a windfall tax on wind and solar farms help us?
because you recoup the vast billions of pounds of subsidies that are being taken from the taxpayer and given to the vested interests of the renewable industry. So you can give that back to people to bring bills down, to bring down the cost of living. We've got to stop the madness of the renewables. We're spending over 10 billion a year on subsidies to the renewables. We're saying you've got to put a windfall tax on all renewable generated energy and a special rate of corporation tax to reduce these wind farms and the solar farms. They're ripping us all off.
I mean, they are getting huge amounts of subsidy.
Over 10 billion a year. It's over 100 billion in the last 12 to 15 years. Our taxpayers' cash. That is the main reason why bills have gone up, why the cost of living has gone up, why jobs are being destroyed in car industry, in the auto, in the
Oh, I don't know. I thought we were told
industry.
we were going to get 500,000 new green jobs. Have we not had those?
No, we haven't. All we're doing is destroying and killing jobs, as well in oil and gas industry, in chemicals, and that's killing the economy. We've had GDP figures out this morning, which basically flat once again. Per person, we're now in the third year of recession. We are over 1% poorer than we were 3 years ago. The long-term average growth rate, over 2% a year. That means in the last 3 years, we've got 7% poorer. That's why everybody is feeling so constrained. Net zero is a primary cause of it. The other thing we would do is we would force the national grid to put all of these new proposed pylons, put those cables underground. We would prevent the companies from being able to pay any dividends to their shareholders until they put the cables underground. That's what the British people want. That's how you look after the countryside and our environment, and we think that's got the majority support.
I would certainly be happy to vote for that. I mean, again, you mentioned GDP, and again, the figures flatlining 0.1%. Not, I mean, you know, potato. We are flatlining, have done for quite some time under the Tories and under the new Labour government. But as you point out, per capita, because of growth in population, more people coming to the country than leaving the country, and unfortunately, a lot of people coming to the country aren't perhaps offering the economic boom that some of the people leaving the country, the brain drain of some of our brightest and best, looking to go somewhere with a bit more confidence and optimism in the world. That is counting against us. How do we deal with that, though? How do we get that growth? I mean, you mentioned net zero, but what else? Because, I mean, one of the issues, of course, got mass immigration, often low-skilled workers. We've also got huge numbers of our own homegrown people claiming sickness benefits. There's a story today talking about how we should get bosses to solve Britain's sickness crisis and get people with health conditions back to work. That's what Government Minister Stephen Timson said.
There are 5 key things to driving growth. First of all, you've got to have lower taxes so you make work pay, make risk-taking pay. Second, you've got to have smart regulations, not mass daft regulations imposed by the EU. Third, you've got to stop massive wasteful government spending, including a benefit system which is way too generous to the people that want to sit on the backside as opposed to get up and go to work. Fourthly, you've got to stop the mass immigration that suppresses wages and essentially reduces productivity because you've got cheap, low-skilled immigration. And then the umbrella of net zero, which no one's ever had before, imposed on us by the ridiculous Tories. We've just got to scrap the whole thing, and that's what we announced in our press conference yesterday. Not only do we scrap it, but these are the way we get the money back to the British people. That's how you get the bills down. That's how you get the cost of living down. And people have to link net zero means higher bills, higher cost of living. That's why it's so stupid. Let's
talk about immigration. It's been a major topic for Reform UK, a large source of your support. We've had some extraordinary stories in the last week or so. We've had the man who can't be deported because a Pakistani paedophile, because it would be difficult, be too much of a hardship for his own children who he's not allowed to live with because he's a convicted paedophile. We have got the man who can't be taken back to Albania because he thinks his son won't like foreign chicken nuggets. It's not the only reason given, but mentioned. We've had a Nigerian woman approved on her eighth attempt to stay here in Britain after she joined a terror group, because basically that would mean, she couldn't then be deported back to Nigeria. These stories come in every single day. They are non-stop. We are told we've got, Keir Starmer was raised at PMQs with him by Kemi Baden, not the Tory leader, the absurd story of an upper-tier tribunal judge basically allowing, under bizarrely, the Ukraine family scheme, a family in Gaza, mum, dad, 4 kids, living there right now. Obviously, a home has been bombed. Well, that's pretty much all 1.8 million people in Gaza, to be allowed to come here under exceptional circumstances, under a scheme for literally another country, but allowed to come here under Article 8, the Human Rights Convention. I mean, What do you at Reform make of these decisions?
The truth is, we all despair at these ludicrous decisions, and ultimately, which the Prime Minister did say in PMQs yesterday, he felt, I think we all feel, that judge's decision was wrong, and he's going to look at it, and whether that requires loopholes or whatever. It is ludicrous. You have to wonder what is going on in the minds of these judges, and our key solution, we've got to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, we've got to look at our own Human Rights Act, so that actually judges realise that it's Parliament that sets the rules, not judges, making their own interpretations to suit their own personal political convictions and bias.
Just finally, I want to ask you about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. The news, of course, they were commenting on GDP figures. First of all, we had the revelation that she hadn't actually worked as an economist at Halifax Bank of Scotland. She came to be an economist at the Bank of England and at her HBOS. It turns out she wasn't an economist. She worked in the complaints department. She was doing an admin job for HBOS. And then it turns out that she'd exaggerated quite a lot of the time that she'd spent at the Bank of England and indeed at HBOS. And there's been some question marks about her departure from both jobs. It has now been confirmed by the BBC. They say that she did actually leave the Bank of England 9 months earlier than she states in her LinkedIn profile. So she spent 5.5 years working at the bank, including nearly a year studying, so she wasn't at the bank then, despite publicly claiming repeatedly to having spent a decade there. Now, that's not just someone failing to correct someone in an interview saying, oh, you were a decade at Bank of England. You fill out your own LinkedIn profile. You fill out your own CV. This stuff has been touted, has it not, again and again by the now Prime Minister when they were in opposition about, we've got this woman, she's going to be the first woman Chancellor. For some reason, they thought that was a thing. But key thing is she's been a top economist at the Bank of England and at Halifax Bank of Scotland. It's looking quite patchy now, isn't it?
What's extraordinary is that the mainstream media didn't carry out this scrutiny before she was elected with the Prime Minister to run the country last July. I find that very odd indeed, don't you? But look, the reality is she's clearly been economical at best with the reality of her own CV. And I think what we're learning is that if she can't get her own CV right, can she really run the accounts department of the country, i.e. the Treasury?
In most jobs, if you've lied on your CV, I mean, if you claim to have a qualification or claim to have experience somewhere that was not true, you'd be automatically sacked, wouldn't you?
Oh, but no, not under this Labour government. Of course, it's one rule for everybody else and a different rule for them. Look, the reality is she can't run her own CV and she can't run the economy of a country, and we're all getting poorer as a result. OK,
thank you very much, Richard Tice. Very much appreciate that. We're going to talk to Philip Ingram a little bit later in the show. Up next, we're going to talk to the economist Liam Halligan about those latest GDP figures. But Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, thank you very much.
If you have an active threat to a member of public or to a politician, you better believe it should be your policy to send somebody to protect them. And they didn't do that. I've been waiting 7 weeks for somebody to get back to me regarding my complaint against them. Finally, I heard back from the IOPC. The letter was addressed to Mr. Amos, so I don't know if that's some kind of a sick joke, telling me that they weren't going to be doing an investigation, but they couldn't tell me why. And if they think that they're going to just investigate themselves and find themselves not guilty, they have another thing coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, that got heated with Richard Tice. I think, we need to hold people's feet to the fire on the issues. You could agree on some issues, disagree on others. Love to hear your thoughts on that conversation about Ukraine and indeed GDP and everything else. 0344 499 1000. Oh, your thoughts on Rachel Reeves' CV would be interesting too. I wonder what my next guest makes of all that. Liam Halligan is a journalist and economist and joins us now. A very good morning to you, Liam.
Morning, Julia. Nice to be with you.
Nice to you to join us. Let's start with the GDP figures. Yay, we've got growth. It's brilliant. Everything is going just swimmingly. Everything's fine. Is that right?
They're very ropey numbers, very low by historic standards. Fourth quarter GDP numbers. Well, GDP numbers are always subject to revision. These are preliminary numbers. Fourth quarter numbers in particular. Yes, Rachel Reeves has just about avoided steering Britain into a recession within the first 6 months of Labour taking office for the first time in 14 years, but only by the skin of her teeth. Yeah. It's worth saying two main points. One was made by Richard Tice earlier. In GDP per head terms, income per head, we are in recession. We've seen income per head fall now for 2 successive quarters. Yeah. The third and fourth quarter of 2024, so we're in recession. The other thing in that sense, the other thing I'd say, Julia, is within these numbers, the headline number is just about okay enough to allow Rachel Reeves to try and reset the narrative and say her policies are going to work out. But the only reason we're growing at all at the moment is because the government has borrowed a load of money and is spending it on unproductive things, right? Like public sector pay rises. That's the only place where this growth is coming from.
So the private sector is being propped up by the public sector.
One moment, Julia, one moment. Final point. The real, for me, headline out of this is that production, which is manufacturing and other like tangible things which particularly happen outside of London and the South East across the Red Wall where reform is strong, production fell 0.8%. So it fell 8 times more than GDP is growing, and it fell, Julia, for the 5th successive quarter. That, for me, is largely because of net zero policies.
That's very, the cost of energy, exactly. And again, people are very slowly waking up to this. My God, we've been banging the drum on this for a long time, haven't we? But this is the thing.
And not been thanked for it.
No, exactly. Well, we're just climate deniers, darling. That's what it is. But this is it. The economy's not growing. Everything that the Labour Party want to do is predicated on growth. Was it 2.5% growth? Well, that's not happening anytime soon, is it? And that's part of the issue. We've also got the Office for Budget Responsibility, understanding there's been a leak. So now, of course, the concern is where was the leak from, as opposed to the concern about the figures. But the OBR basically saying that Rachel Reeves, this ridiculous face, fiscal headroom is all gone now because of various extra costs. So basically, are we looking in the spring, despite her saying there'll only be one major budget announcement a year, are we looking at either massive more spending cuts or tax rises in the spring from the Chancellor?
She's certainly got big decisions to make in the spring, Julia, I would say. Look, when the economy doesn't grow, you generate less tax revenue and governments have to spend more money on unemployment when the economy is not growing because more people are laid off and other measures to support the economy. So the public finances, as you and I have discussed over many years, get pulled apart in both directions. That's where we are. It's not just pundits like me, some of us qualified economists, unlike some other people in public life I could mention. It's not just pundits like me who are saying this. The Bank of England itself, which of course is an apolitical, very careful organisation, they do some serious economic modelling there. They have halved their growth forecast. I'm amazed this hasn't made more news.
Yeah.
They've halved their growth forecast for this year and next year from 1.5 to 0.75%. Yeah. That absolutely destroys the public finances. And so Rachel Reeves has no fiscal...
No,
she has to make a decision this March or April. Either she's got to, I wouldn't say she's going to cut spending, she's got to rein in the growth of spending, annoying the left of her party, or she could look at historic evidence and say, you know what, the way to get an economy moving is to cut taxes.
Ta-da! It works everywhere else. I'm only hurrying you because I've only got about a minute left, but I want to ask you about Rachel Reeves' CV. It now does appear that she worked at the Bank of England for about 9 months less than she stated herself on her own LinkedIn profile. It's still, she said, a decade. It's actually 5.5 years. It's been whittled down and down and down. And we know now she wasn't an economist at Halifax Bank of Scotland. I mean, in any other field, in any other job, if you gave this information and then you were found to have told a little porky pie about it, you'd lose your job, wouldn't you? Should the Prime Minister sack her?
Well, of course, but you know, this is politics and public life, and normal rules don't seem to apply that apply to the rest of us in the real world. You're right to talk about it, and of course it's outrageous, but I do think it gets to a point where it becomes displacement activity, because she's not going to resign over this. No. And the public have heard it many times before, and I think it's now baked in to the sort of Labour share price, if you like, and Labour share price is plunging. You see the popularity rating falling. Of course, you see Reform ahead in lots and lots of opinion polls. What we should be doing, we should be focusing on this debate about how we get out of this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a debate for another day, unfortunately. We've got a bit more time. Liam Halligan, always good to talk to you. Economist and journalist Liam Halligan there. So much to talk about that. I want to get Philip Ingram's thoughts on all of what my last couple of guests have had to say. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Do get in touch at 0344 499 1000, particularly on Ukraine, on the GDP figures, Rachel Reeves' CV, you name it. I'd love to hear your calls. Do get in touch. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. It's already got quite lively in the first hour. If you've just tuned in, you have missed a good show. Plenty more to come, though, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It is absolutely fabulous to have your company. I'm with you live all the way until 1 o'clock. Going to talk more about Ukraine. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have begun talks to end the war in Ukraine 3 years after Russia's full-scale invasion. It was February 2022. They had a 90-minute phone call. However, in a huge blow to Kyiv, any peace deal is expected to include no NATO membership, as well as Russia keeping the territory it annexed, not just in 2014 in terms of Crimea, but also eastern regions, the Donbass, etc. So is this really peace in our time, or is this a complete sellout and betrayal of Ukraine? Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can also get in touch at Talk TV. On X, calls are charged at the national rate, text cost £1, standard network rate message. Also, in a Talk exclusive, UK defence officials have suggested that defence spending will be capped at 2.5% of GDP, with no further uplift, despite increasing pressure from Trump and NATO. Talk of a 3% percentage of GDP, or even 5% is what the US have suggested Europe should start spending. Also, today, Keir Starmer is going to set out plans for his new towns project, with designs inspired by King Charles, saying that he wants them built by British workers. Well, good luck with that. I don't think we've got enough, have we? As he vows to take on the NIMBYs and the blockers and ensure more people can own their own homes. Motto of this show, build more houses. I'm in favour of that. So we're going to talk about all of that. Plenty more coming up. I'm delighted to say Philip Ingram is still with us. He's a former senior military intelligence officer and joins us. Good morning once again to you.
Good morning again.
Now, very cruelly, because we were tight on time, because I was having a right old Barney with my mate Richard Tice from Reform UK.
That was fun to be sitting in here when that was going on.
He's just sitting there going, I hate it when Mummy and Daddy row.
I was doing time out.
in terms of we're discussing GDP, we're discussing Ukraine. In terms of my conversation with him on Ukraine, and it ties in with our question to our audience today, is this a betrayal of Ukraine? And why do so many people who care so strongly about borders and are very strongly defending Israel, for instance, like Donald Trump and his Secretary of State, and everyone, why on earth is there no defence of Ukrainian national sovereignty and borders?
Yeah, it's hugely complex. Your war is diplomacy by other means. A war ends whenever the conditions are set for both sides to have to sign some form of agreement. Now, in some cases, that's when one side wins, as we did in the Second World War, as we did in the First World War, as we did in the Falklands. In other times, it's whenever the conditions are set that both sides have effectively fought themselves to a stalemate, and you have to then sit down and negotiate over something, as we've seen.
But when people say, all wars end with negotiation, that is not true.
Well,
some wars end with negotiation.
Well, they do, but no, all wars end with negotiation, but sometimes that negotiation is imposed because you have won. So I'm telling you what your negotiating position is.
Yeah. Treaty of Versailles, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas others are, you have to come up with some form of agreement between both sides to stop the bloodshed. Yeah. Now, Ukraine can't win on the battlefield tactically. They cannot recapture the territory back again. They don't have the wherewithal to do that. Russia can't capture Ukraine by fighting that. Ukraine could be given the conditions to win if we destroyed and helped them further destroy the Russian economy, destroy their ability to bring more people in, destroy their logistics.
If we actually made sure the sanctions weren't got around, which they clearly are right now.
It's not just the sanctions. If we give them longer-range weapons so that their military wherewithal inside Russia could be attacked, that's an escalation that could go one step too far. And therefore we could have done that. But again, it's a could have, and it might go on for another 5 years or so. I think what we're hearing at the minute are opening positions which are forcing Putin or giving Putin an opportunity to come to the negotiating table. But there had to be something that made him think that he was going to, in inverted commas, win.
He needs to be given a face-saving get-out. Yeah. And that's what you often do in these scenarios. You give people a face-saving get-out so that you can get them to the table. I get that. But do you think that what we've heard so far, and again, Richard has to think, well, Donald Trump works in mysterious ways, but if the two key things that Vladimir Putin wants is to at least keep the territories already got, and for Ukraine not to join NATO so that he can come back again and take another bite of the pie without risking NATO's full force. I don't even trust that NATO would actually back Ukraine. I don't trust that NATO would come to our defence right now, to be honest with you. I think we're so weak lily-livered in the West. But if we've given away the two key things he wants, already, the Defence Secretary of the United States, Pete Hegseth, has already said that. Donald Trump's hinted at it. What is the negotiation? We've literally said, you can have anything you want. Just put down your weapons, please, Vlad.
I can see this ending up in a huge demilitarised zone and possibly a United Nations or other coalition body administered zone, as we've seen, in different conflicts.
But Ukraine not being allowed to apply to NATO, not being allowed to join the EU, remaining as this sort of buffer zone, unable to actually, the people of Ukraine be unable to actually direct their own country.
Yeah, and that could be a solution.
Would we put up with that?
Well, President Zelensky has proposed something like that to Donald Trump already.
But that's a last resort.
Yeah, but he's already done that before there was even talks of we've got into this position with the negotiations.
But he knew that
he was playing Donald Trump, and this is where we've got Donald Trump playing Vladimir Putin, Putin playing Trump. We've got Zelensky playing Putin. We've got Zelensky playing Trump. We've got Trump, Hesketh playing all NATO leaders and EU leaders. The people that are losing out of this on the surface at the moment are Ukraine and all the EU leaders, because it's thrown their economic plans out completely. Putin is feeling that he's winning, but I think there's more to play here.
No, exactly. Bearing in mind also, sanctions on Donald Trump. Sanctions on Russia. They're doing a get around. So, you can't send any gas here. Oh well, we'll send it to India, and then India will ship it in. I mean, that's what's going on. Their economy is still doing not as badly as people expected. But also crucially, America has benefited because we're buying our gas from Europe. We're buying it from America, so their economy booms as a result of those sanctions. They're not impacted by it because they're energy self-sufficient in a way that we are not. Let that be a lesson to us with your net zero nonsense, by the way. It just seems to me this is just the art of the deal. Oh, my goodness me. I mean, I would not allow Donald Trump to negotiate the price of an ice cream for me.
Well, exactly. But he's looking at it from an American economic perspective. He knows that if he forces countries to have to spend lots more on defence, which he's doing, that the only place in the international market to get that stuff quickly is US. So he'll see an increase in US defence manufacturers.
Well, and Zelensky's pushed that line. But I want to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think this is a betrayal of Ukraine or not? Tell us why it is. Tell us why it's not. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Let's also talk about what's been happening in Munich this morning. A car has driven quite obviously deliberately into pedestrians in Munich, the German city. We're now told there are 20 injuries. Some of those are critically injured. We haven't had reports of deaths yet, but it may just be too soon for that to happen. The man who was driving the car, the driver, has been secured on site, we're told by the police, and currently poses no further danger. Again, it'll be those mental health problems that keep afflicting lots of countries in Europe and indeed here, eh? Another one of those.
Well, cars into crowds. We had the German Christmas market, and then we had the attack in New Orleans in the United States, another car into the crowd, and we've got the Munich Security Conference at the end of this week going on.
They will be related.
So they could be related.
But this is happening. This is happening routinely in Germany. This is happening routinely in France. And in other countries, we just kind of like almost inured to sort of attacks here. God knows how many are being prevented on any given day. Europe's going to have to wake up to this madness at some point.
We all have to wake up to this. Hostile vehicle mitigation is all the barriers and stuff that you see around the cities.
Diversity bollards, I believe we call them.
Well, no, it probably means something to the security professionals that are out there. But Al Qaeda, ISIS. And please don't anyone try and look this up online. But they run scorecards. They run articles on their online magazines.
Don't look this up online. You'll be reported to prevent.
Well, no, counter-terror police will come and kick your front door down. This is serious. They run scorecards on how many vehicles as a weapon have been used, how many stabbings there have been, and other things.
Little friendly competition.
And they give little training guides as to how to get a vehicle, what sort of vehicles to go and hire or to steal, how to drive them into crowds, how to avoid barriers that are there and everything else.
Wow.
They run articles on this because it's easy to get someone who, vehicles are fantastic weapons for hurting people.
And very different from trying to persuade somebody to commit a suicide attack or to stab people. That's immediacy.
Trying to get explosives and weapons, especially in this country, and shooting weapons, I mean here, is very difficult. But trying to get your hands on a vehicle, very easy. Yeah. Trying to get your hands on a kitchen knife, very easy. And this is why
we're going to blood the kitchen
used.
knives on sale at John Lewis, so that's going to solve that. Then I don't know why you think that's a problem.
We can still buy the zombie knives, so don't worry.
I know, don't. It's so depressing. But anyway, look, I hope, just hope that people haven't died in that horrible attack in Munich again. Mental health, always the issue. Let's go to GDP figures, just discuss them with Liam Halligan, who's an economist. As he points out, one of the few people actually commenting on this stuff, so he's actually a trained economist. GDP up 0.1%, but population up by more, and therefore actually per head of the capita. And this is the key thing, isn't it? Even as he pointed out, because he understands this stuff, you're actually looking at the only reason we're not in recession is because of extra public spending, to pay rises for public sector workers, train drivers and the like, and that's boosting things, whereas manufacturing production is actually going down, and by a lot more. But also overall, per head of the capita, we're not better off because there are more people in the country, and a lot of those people who are arriving aren't actually net producers. I mean, they're in low-paid jobs, low-skilled. They don't contribute more than they actually take in terms of the public services that are contributed by other taxpayers. People are now kind of awake to a lot of this stuff. The people who were pointing this stuff out for years, again, we just shout big, we've shouted big at us. No, it's really clear that, every single new arrival is a net contributor to the economy. And you're thinking, really? I mean, just a basic understanding of economics would tell you that couldn't possibly be true. They're not all running multi-million-pound businesses, and it's just an absolute load of nonsense. But I mean, this just shows up. There is no growth yet. Yep. You might say, I wouldn't expect Labour to have delivered growth this quickly, but it ain't getting any better, and there's no likelihood that it will do in the near future.
Well, and the difficulty was, as the Tory government, who are not blameless in this, were going out, we were starting to see the movement towards growth. That has been turned the other way, and it's the underlying factors, manufacturing in particular, that will suggest whether we're going to get any form of turnaround. And those figures are going completely the wrong way. And of course, Labour, when they came in, said that growth was their top priority. All of their plans rely on 2.5% growth per year. Yeah. Well, they're 6 months, 7 months in.
Good luck with
that. They're nowhere near even 0.5% growth, never mind 2.5% growth. Yeah. We're in trouble.
We really are in trouble. We really, really are. But luckily, we've got a fantastic economist and the first woman Chancellor. It's very exciting and terribly, terribly important, apparently, that she's a woman. But we do have Rachel Reeves as Chancellor. Yet again, she's in the news for wrong reasons, though, not about the GDP thing. Oh, that's pretty wrong reasons. She's in the news also because her CV. Big question marks once again about her CV. We were told Bank of England economist for 10 years, and then I think it was 5 years at Halifax Bank of Scotland, HBOS. Then it turns out, she wasn't. We found out first of all she wasn't at Bank of England for all of that time. It was a bit shorter than that. She was away studying. She was on secondment somewhere else. And then we found out that actually at Halifax Bank of Scotland, she wasn't an economist. She was kind of in a backroom staff role. That wasn't what she was doing. But she had claimed 100% in interviews on her LinkedIn profile and others, and quite happily sat there while the Prime Minister lauded her CV that was the case. Well, it wasn't the case. That was untrue. Question marks have also been raised over her reasons for her departure from both jobs, and what circumstances. Did she choose to leave, or was she let go? We've all met those people, haven't we? Now it's emerged that she actually only worked at the Bank of England for 5.5 years. Now, if someone says, I worked at the Bank of England as an economist for 10 years, and they actually only worked for 9.5 years, I think we'd all go, yeah, fine. Yeah. I mean, look, but her LinkedIn profile says 10 years. Well, she wasn't there for 10 years. That's a lie.
And this is another reset. She's been caught out beforehand, so she changed her LinkedIn profile, she changed her CV.
She denied there was anything, and then she changed it.
Exactly, and it seems as if she's changed it for something that's not quite right again. I'm sorry. She could have got away with it.
I mean, I know how long I worked at places.
Exactly.
I mean, do you know how long?
And there's a big difference between a decade and 5.5 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a casual. You were there for a decade, yes. Yeah. And
her position's untenable. And Keir Starmer.
In any other job, if you're a military man, okay, in any other job, if you're in your job and you had something on your CV and that was something you stated on your CV and you got a job,
it's gross misconduct.
And it's not like, oh, I waitressed at this place for this long. It's irrelevant to the job I'm doing now. Even in a job I've been in the past, I was required. I wasn't hired on. I'd never mentioned this in my interviews. I'd never produced a CV. It was just I got a job on a different basis. But then I was asked to sort of to provide proof of what my qualifications, and I suddenly realised, I never got a certificate for my postgraduate diploma. As I went straight to a job, no one's asked for it in 30 years, and I had to go back and say, do you have a record of me getting this diploma? And thank God they did, but I didn't have any. But they would go, well, you need to provide it. I went, but I didn't claim that I had this. To get the job, it was irrelevant. No, you have to prove it. I would have had to provide. Now, so how on earth can you be the Chancellor of the Exchequer and you've completely lied on... Let's call it what it is. She lied about her experience to look better for the job. One of the reasons why a lot of people say, well, we're going to vote for Labour, and Keir Starmer lauded her all the time, is that Rachel Reeves is, got an experienced economist. We're not... It's not Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell. Look at us. We're kosher.
And she only worked in the Bank of England for those 5.5 years when she was very young, straight out of university. That you don't build the experience that you need to run a country up when you're in your...
I worked at Lloyds Bank for 6 months cleaning their toilets. Does that count? I worked at a bank.
Well, you've got economic and banking experience. So you're a banker.
I'd be a better Chancellor. She's also, it turns out, got terrible taste in art. She's replaced all these portraits. We mentioned it on the show yesterday. I was hoping by today we'd have permission to use the god-awful pictures that she's got, but we're not allowed to use them, annoyingly. We don't have permission. But frankly, I'm saving you. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm saving you. I like modern art. It's kind of the only kind of art I really like I've got in my home. But, oh my God, these are horrible. These are just horrible big splurges of... They just look like misery. Can I have a picture of misery, please? Here you go. These awful pictures. And she's replaced portraits of Disraeli and other former chancellors who then went on to become Prime Minister with these awful portraits. Same as the Prime Minister, getting rid of, Margaret Thatcher and Shakespeare and Raleigh and people like... they have just got no sense of our history or of our proud national heritage, have they?
Yeah, and on one hand, yes, they're allowed to put in their office whatever they want in their office and all the rest of it. On the other hand, actually, their office isn't their office. It's our office that we lend to them. And part of them being in the position as Chancellor of the Exchequer of the United Kingdom or Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is representing us. It's our values, our history and everything else. So we should be reminding people of our history, our successful leaders in the past, whether they're from your political background or another political background, doesn't matter.
Why do you want to have pictures of people's misery during lockdown? I mean, I'm a big fan of, never forgive, never forget, because I want people held to account for it. But these are the people. It's one of them's about a woman masked. I mean, to this day, when I see programmes that have got footage from that period and people having to be masked, I can feel my whole body tense up. I can feel like clenching in my stomach at just the visceral anger that I still feel about that time and what they did to us and the lies they told us. Why would you want that on your wall, other than the fact you're just trying to recreate that feeling with our economy now? Well, maybe that's her driving force, to make us feel as miserable then as we do now, given that a lot of the problems we've got now are as a result of the policies then which we're still going to be paying for the next, well, your and my entire lives.
Well, I'm even more cynical. Timing. She knew that she was going to find out with further miscalculations on her CV, and she's thrown out another story to try and deflect from that. These gawping pictures.
I know, exactly. Gawping. Let's be honest, it's not a miscalculation, it's not a mistake.
No,
Rachel Reeves, you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You got that job based on your past and your CV and your record in work. You have lied repeatedly about every aspect of those qualifications and your record in employment. In any other job, in any other walk of life, whether you're the cleaner at the Treasury or whether you're the permanent secretary at the Treasury, you would be sacked on the spot for gross misconduct for having lied on your CV. Rachel Reeves, you need to go. You have lied on your CV. You are not the person you say you are. You are not got the record in employment that you said you had, which made you apparently credible as a potential Chancellor. And I'm afraid if you won't fall on your sword, then I think Keir Starmer should sack you. End of. And if you don't agree with anything I've said, feel free to sue me. But you know everything I've said is right. 11:21 is the time. I'm going to get to your calls. Lots of calls coming in about Ukraine. Is this a betrayal of Ukraine, of this deal between Donald Trump and Putin that looks on the cards? Love to hear from you on that. Love to hear from you about Rachel Reeves and her CV. I mean, is it a CV? I mean, it's just a fairy tale at this point, isn't it? I mean, you may as well have got Hans Christian Andersen to write your CV, love. 11:22 is the time. This is Talk.
we accept her arguments, if we accept her lawyer's arguments, then you're never going to be able to be racist against white people. And I think that's just clearly wrong. I think that just has to be, by all logic, wrong. And I would rather use the definition of racism used by Dr. Martin Luther King, who's a very good and decent man, and no reason at all not to use his definition, and to say that people should not be judged by the colour of their skin. They should be judged by the content of their character.
Yeah.
And if you see how that young lady was behaving, she clearly does not have a very good character.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. But we'll be talking about our CVs now in the break. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever lied to get a job? Here's the question. A little bit of light relief other than Ukraine. Get in touch. Please give us a call. 0344 499 1000. What lies have you told on your CV to get a job, and were you found out? You don't have to give your real name. Rachel Reeves, if you want to call in, do call in. I say get Hans Christian Andersen to do it, because he obviously wrote your CV. But do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go straight to your calls, though, asking you specifically about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. They've had a 90-minute meeting or phone call. They've begun talks to end the war in Ukraine, but Russia will basically keep their captured territory. No NATO membership for Ukraine to protect them in the future. Is this a betrayal of Ukraine? Tell us what you think it is, yes or no, and why. 0344 499 1000. Nick is on the line. He's in Lincolnshire. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well. What do you want to say?
I'm formerly military intelligence as well. In fact, I think Philip was probably my commanding officer at one point.
Sorry, do you guys all know each other? Everyone knows everyone in this world.
I can't say, otherwise I'd have to shred you.
My point was that no one seems to make, and Philip sort of hinted at it earlier, was that in reality, in the Ukraine conflict, Ukraine was never going to win. It didn't matter how much kit we gave them. It didn't matter how much money we gave them.
Why do you say that?
From a logistical point of view, Russia has a population of around 142 million people. Ukraine has a population of 43 million people. It wasn't going to happen. Short of us putting boots on the ground, which was never going to happen.
Well, why did we bother then? Why did we bother helping them? What a waste of money. Could have cost fewer lives. Let them be. I mean, they would have fought for a few months. Then Russia would have gradually overtaken them. It'd all been over 2 years ago.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, a lot of people have died, and in reality, the result is going to be the same as if they'd negotiated right at the beginning. And the other thing people need to take into account, the fact, is that people keep saying, we just need to get rid of Putin. But Putin, from a Russian point of view, is relatively moderate.
Yeah, that's the scary thing.
So you don't want, if you get rid of him, you've got no idea who's going to come in. He could be far worse than Putin.
That is a very fair point. But do you think this is a betrayal or not?
No, I think Trump's doing again what he said he was going to do, which is try and stop the killing. He said he was going to do that, and he's doing it.
Yeah.
Which is, I wish more politicians would do the same.
Yeah, no, exactly. I always knew he'd be strong on Israel, and I knew he'd be weak on Ukraine. But I personally kept a little bit of hope alive that he would actually, change his mind on Ukraine when he got the briefings and things. But sadly not. But I really appreciate your call, Nick. Philip, do you remember Nick?
Oh, I think I do.
Yes, no.
Yes, I do.
Well, actually, Nick, are you still on the line? Nick, have you ever lied on your CV to get a job?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
I love that. You could be a politician with that answer. I do not recall.
Well, the thing is, you always put on your CV, say, for instance, my CV at the moment, I think has something to do with deploying with multi-million pounds worth of equipment, being responsible for it, et cetera, when in reality I was command post detachment commander in the artillery before I transferred to...
It's not an untruth. I mean, I've got, I've still got...
certainly beefing it up a bit.
Yeah, the last time I wrote a CV was so long ago, but, 100 words per minute, short T-line, short line, which I managed once, but never in the actual test. But I don't claim to have the qualification. Yes. There's ways of writing these things, but I also don't claim to have worked places for a long period of time in different jobs than I actually did, unlike certain people who happen to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. Very much appreciate that, Nick. Thank you. Cliff, let's go to you. You're in East Yorkshire. What do you want to say?
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
I'm just going to say what a great interview it was with Richard Tice. She absolutely buried him and exposed another MP with double standards. Now then, getting to Ukraine conflict. Now then, they signed a treaty with UK, America and Russia.
Yep.
For protection, want to give up the nuclear weapons. Now, if they hadn't given up the nuclear weapons, they'd have never been invaded.
Yep.
Now, you know, I feel that ashamed of being British that, you know, that they've turned their back on Ukraine.
I completely agree with you.
And so as United States, I mean, who can trust Trump in any negotiations? I mean, they're trying their best to get negotiations with all sorts of things, as UK with him. How can we trust a two-faced sod like him? It just begs belief.
Well, that's it. I mean, again, I said, you know, on balance, I'd have voted for the guy, but I knew there were going to be problems, and Ukraine is certainly it. But do you think that long-term people are going to rue the day that he started these negotiations and probably basically just gave away Crimea and other Ukrainian territory to Russia? Do you think that that's going to come back and bite us all in the backside?
Well, all the people that have died, it's just a waste of lives, you know. And the thing is Trump wants to get into bed with Putin against China. You know, I mean, he wants to break that link up between China and Russia. You know, I mean, it's all you know, behind the scenes things that we'll never be privy to.
Oh yeah, absolutely, clear. I so appreciate your call. Thank you very much, Philip Ingram. I'm reminded again of that when Donald Trump was in his first term in the US presidency, he did have a meeting with Vladimir Putin at the sidelines of some sort of G7 summit or something, where he met with him for an hour. Longer than that, a couple of hours, without any officials present whatsoever, a one-on-one meeting. Now, this never happens, ever.
It's unprecedented. But again...
what happened? What was that conversation?
I don't know, and we have to remember that Donald Trump had business dealings into Moscow and into Russia.
And he was getting bank loans from Russia when he couldn't get them in New York because his company was so useless.
There have always been hints that Vladimir Putin has got some form of compromise on Donald Trump. Whether that's there or not, we don't know. But there's certainly something that people would class as an unhealthy relationship between them that's come out. How that's going to influence this, I don't know. I think Donald Trump this time round is much more confident, and you will see how things develop. But he's bringing Putin back into normality again. If he's going to meet him, Putin is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. Once he meets with Donald Trump, that'll give Putin the feeling that he's got some legitimacy back again. This is a slippery slope.
Absolutely. Do welcome your thoughts. I also want to hear from you. Let's have a little bit of light relief. Have you ever lied on your CV like Rachel Reeves has? And did you actually ever get caught out? I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, going to talk to Shadow Defence Minister Marc Francois about where the Tories stand on Ukraine. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Philip Ingram is still here, and we're joined now by Conservative MP and Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois. Very good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm going to put the question to you, which I've been putting to our audience and our guests this morning. With Trump and Putin beginning talks, 90-minute phone call, we're going to have negotiations on the future of Ukraine. Russia, though, already being told, well, you can keep captured territory and no way there's going to be NATO membership for Ukraine. Is this a betrayal of Ukraine?
Well, look, I've just come hot foot from the House of Commons chamber to do this interview. We've just had an urgent question, which we, the Conservatives, secured, all about Ukraine. So there was absolute consensus across the House, all parties, that there can be no negotiations about the future of Ukraine without the direct involvement of Ukraine. It wouldn't be right, after everything the Ukrainians have endured, for this all to be negotiated above their heads. There was absolute unanimity in the Commons about that. Where, from our point of view, the Conservative point of view, what we've said on top of that is there mustn't be an outcome that would allow Putin to claim victory. So here's the risk. If they freeze the border where it currently is, then Putin will probably say three things. He'll say, one, well, I've kept the Crimea. Two, I've got most of the Donbass and a lot of the critical minerals there that go with it.
That's the industrial heartland of Ukraine, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And at the moment, he controls most, but not literally all of it. And the third thing he'd say for domestic consumption would be, I stopped Ukraine joining NATO, so I've won. All of that sacrifice and all the bloodshed has been worth it. And we cannot allow a situation where Putin in any way can claim victory.
Well, look, I don't think anyone realistically was thinking if there's any negotiation under Donald Trump that, we helped Ukraine get Crimea back. We didn't do much in 2014. Everyone kind of shrugged. That was the signal, by the way, to Putin that he could probably get away with the next stage of his war on Ukraine. I mean, realistically, I don't know how Ukraine can put up with having part of their territory taken in Donbass. But again, if they haven't got the wherewithal, the funding and the military might from the US and the EU, they haven't got much choice. But we would have a choice of a NATO membership. Now, the Defence Secretary of the United States, Peter Hegseth, has basically said that is not going to happen. That's not an option. But realistically, was that an option when you've got the likes of Turkey, probably Hungary as well, who would actually go, yeah, I don't think so?
Well, look, if you go back to Trump's first term, he famously argued very strongly that all NATO members should spend at least 2% of GDP on defence. Now, when he was making that argument, there were about 5 European NATO members that did. We were one of them, by the way.
Only on a technicality.
No, we did spend the 2%. By the NATO definition, we did, Julia. But now there are about 23, I think. So, Trump has always used this very simple analogy. He's a keen golfer, the world knows. You join a golf club, you pay the membership fee. And on that, I completely agree with him. We'll have to see what kind of figure the Americans are suggesting that we spend. But I think everybody realises that we need to spend more money on defence. We can get into the totals in a moment if you want. But Lord Dannett, who's a former head of the army, said this morning that it would be madness, or very unwise, to spend £18 billion to hire back the Chagos Islands that we already own, when we should be spending that money on our own defence. So I think any sane person would agree with that.
I was going to bring you on to Chagos, and again, this has massive implications. This decision for whatever Donald Trump and Putin decide for our future defence spending, and I mean, one of the sort of the saner members of the Labour government, I would say, is John Healey, the Defence Secretary. But it's been very, very clear there ain't no money. There isn't going to be any money. And we're in a situation where people are not willing to spend money on defence spending when there's so many other, problems in the healthcare service and infrastructure and things. But the reality is we're going to probably end up spending it at some point in the next 10 years, and it's going to cost us a lot more when we do it in an emergency.
Well, history shows that, the appeasement of dictators doesn't work. And one of the Tory MPs today reminded us of the old Roman quote, civis pacem para bellum. He who desires peace should prepare for war.
Exactly.
As a deterrent, right? A Roman general said that a very long while ago, and he was right. So in that context, it's utter madness. In fact, the Times, in a very powerful leader, described the Chagos deal as their word, insane. I mean, it's a bit like us giving £18 billion to rent back the Falklands from Argentina. Yeah. So
no. Don't give them ideas, because that's going to be next on the list. I've got no doubt at all.
I'm sorry, Julie, you warned me about that last time, to be fair.
You've got to stop suggesting these things. But we're told now the Chagos Islands deal, that could be challenged in the courts. I mean, everything gets challenged in the courts, but it shouldn't have to be challenged in the courts, should it? But that's the thing. I do not trust this government to actually protect our national interest, because why on earth, when we know we're entering such a much more we're already in a very dangerous period in terms of the post-Cold War sort of settlement, that's over now. There's no one sensible who knows anything about strategy, the military and geopolitics, who doesn't think we are in a very dangerous time. Why would you give away basically control of, to all intents and purposes, and access for China via Mauritius to a major important strategic military base that the US and the UK rely on?
The government should just drop the whole thing. I mean, there would be a supreme irony if a government which is led by a human rights lawyer, which is obsessed, and I use the word deliberately, obsessed with so-called international human rights, were then to lose on this in court. I mean, there would certainly be an irony in that, but it should never, ever come to that. Look, even in terms of which government department would pay this $18 billion, I tabled some questions recently to the Treasury, and it came back bluntly that even the Treasury don't know who would pay for it.
We know who will pay for it. Us.
Well, ultimately, yes. You know, Mrs. Thatcher once famously said, "There's no such thing as government money. There's only taxpayers' money."
Exactly.
And that remains as true today as when she said it nearly 50 years ago.
Absolutely.
So it really would be. The Times are right. It would be insane, when we should be spending more money on our defence, to give $18 billion to Mauritius to rent back an island that we effectively...
and to weaken our defence. It was also extraordinary. Again, this wasn't a binding ruling from an international court. It was sort of a recommendation thing. But also, we now know that one of the judges who made that decision in the international court was a Chinese judge who'd previously backed and defended Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You know, I mean, seriously, we don't need to take these people seriously. We should just ignore it. It is utterly bizarre.
If I may, it's worse than that. There's an important point. Forgive the legalese, but you get the point.
Yeah.
When we signed up to that court in 2017, we had an opt-out. And the opt-out said that no decision of the ICJ that affected either a current or a former Commonwealth country would be legally binding on the United Kingdom. So it's an advisory judgment. Even if it were a final judgment, we wouldn't be legally bound because we have an opt-out when we joined.
Very good point.
So the whole thing is madness, and it's all because the PM and certain people around him are literally obsessed with international law and human rights.
If only they cared about the human rights of people here and the law here, that would be a really good thing. Can I ask you just finally, we've got the latest GDP figures. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is going to be given commentary. We're basically flatlining. Things ain't looking good. We're not going to be able to pay for any of the stuff that she thinks we're going to be able to pay for by growth, because we're not seeing any. We have, though, seen quite a lot of growth in her CV. It's emerged the latest aspect of her CV that's not quite correct. Big porcupines being told. It seems to me that Hans Christian Andersen's been writing her LinkedIn profile over the years rather than her. We had told you she spent a decade, 10 years as an economist at the Bank of England. Then she spent a number of years at Halifax Bank of Scotland as an economist. Then it emerged, well, she hadn't actually been at Halifax Bank of Scotland as an economist. She was in a backroom sort of complaints department role. Question marks about the terms in which she'd left both of these jobs. Had she been, quote, let go rather than chose to leave herself, under what circumstances? Now it emerges, although actually we've been whittling down these 10 years, it's now only 5.5 years that she actually was at the Bank of England as a junior economist. This was the basis on which we were told her as a next Chancellor, the first woman Chancellor, apparently an interesting fact to Labour voters and no one else, that she was qualified to do the job and she would bring expertise and sense to the job. Now it turns out that she can't even bring expertise to her own CV. Should she resign? Should she be sacked for lying on her CV? Because everyone else would be sacked for doing that.
Well, look, I still have some friends I was at school with who are now, down the years, doing, quite senior jobs in the city. And I was speaking to one of them recently. He put it like this. He said, within the city, they're now so tightly regulated by the various regulatory bodies that if one of them, say working for an investment bank, were to be found to have fiddled or embellished their CV, that bank's HR department would have them out of the door in minutes. Yeah. It would be seen as, contrary to regulatory procedure. Yep. So in the city, to be caught embellishing your CV is effectively, at least in certain roles, a sacking offence, which is why, this was what my friend said, the Chancellor in the city, when people go out in the evening and they have a couple of drinks after work, it's derision. She's a figure of fun, and people no longer take her seriously because of these allegations. So it really would be an idea from her point of view, perhaps to publish a completely updated CV if she wants to retain her credibility in the city, to say, OK, all right, here we are. This is what I really did and didn't do. Do you take my point?
No, I mean, I think she needs to do that, but I'm sorry, everyone else in pretty much any other job would be sacked on the spot, and I don't know why the rules should be different for politicians. In fact, I think they should be even tighter for politicians. Mark Francois, we're going to have to leave it there. Appreciate that you're joining us, Conservative Shadow Defence Minister. Philip Ingram, we talked about the CV issue, unless you want to come back on that, but the Chagos Islands. There's a very good point. We are desperately scrabbling for money to pay for, all of the major public services we need, and people paying sky-high taxes. And then, 18 billion. OK, it's not 18 billion in 1 year, but it's 18 billion quid that we don't have, that we're going to be paying to a country that has no right to Chagos Islands to give away an important defence base, effectively. There's the money. That we could spend that on defence.
Oh, we could do tomorrow. And there's no logic behind why there's so much political push being put behind the Chagos Islands deal this early in this government's tenure. And therefore, when you take all the logical things away, there has to be something illogical or something illegal behind it. And that's what it all points to. And the government is not giving us the truth. So everyone's making their assumptions that there is something underhanded going on here, because that's the only logical answer. I think we are rightly assuming that, indeed. 11:47 is the time. Just the latest from Munich, where we've seen an attack where a car has been driven deliberately into people. We know 20 people injured, 2 critically injured. Police spokesman has just said that the driver was apprehended at the scene. He was a 24-year-old Afghan national. I know. I'm as surprised as you are. The car approached police vehicles at the scene before speeding up and deliberately hitting people, the spokesman said. So we'll keep you posted on any developments there. God, all those mental health problems, all those Afghan arrivals, eh? What a shame. 11:47 is the time. This is Talk.
Southport not have happened, they wouldn't have released this Prevent Learning review.
Right.
The inquiry that I'm calling for also needs to extend to Essex Police, because they had a threat the night before, and they keep releasing these stupid canned responses about how the threat wasn't related. I'm not saying it was related. What I'm saying is you should have gone to his constituency surgery the next day, and he wouldn't be dead, because the guy that did it has admitted that he went to other constituency surgeries with his weapon, saw police presence and turned around.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up after midday, we're going to actually get back to Rachel Reeves' CV, because there's some question marks, very big question marks, being raised about her expenses while she was in various jobs, and whether or not she was using her company credit card in the way that perhaps you would be expected to use your company credit card. More coming up on that very, very soon. Right now, let's turn our attention to something that is a major theme of my show in a normal week, which is build more houses. And I've been very supportive of the government, saying we're going to have to actually, let's face it, annoy an awful lot of the NIMBYs to get houses built, get through planning. It's something the Tory party kind of failed to do on any mass scale, although, again, we didn't import millions of people. We probably wouldn't need as many as new homes. But Keir Starmer is setting out plans today for a dozen new towns with designs inspired by King Charles, saying he wants them to be built by British workers, which is all very well, but have we got enough trained British workers, or are they all on the sick? But he's going to reveal that 100 areas across England have applied to build new towns with more than 10,000 people. He says he's going to take on the NIMBYs and the blockers so more people can own their own home. About a dozen areas are going to be chosen in the summer to become new towns, and he wants construction underway before the end of the Parliament. So again, we're still looking at another 4 years before they even start putting a brick down. Let's talk about this with Millie Dodd, who's a spokeswoman at Just Build Homes. Hello, Millie.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. I mean, it's your organisation, your campaign group does exactly what it says on the tin. Just build homes. That's what we need to do. People need somewhere to live. We need to build the homes. Are these the sort of homes we want? And what do they mean by when they say these are designs inspired by King Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the narrative that they're presenting about these homes could be improved a little bit. I think when they're talking about well-designed homes, when people need homes, they're actually more concerned about having access to safe and secure housing, not so much about the design that it's going to be.
Oh, I think people do care about that. I mean, it's that thing. People just shoot up a whole load of 1 or 2 bedroom small box apartments. Our homes are getting smaller, and they're often are very ugly, which I think is one of the reasons why lots of people object in the neighbourhood. But why not build homes that, I mean, they don't have to be, looking like, Victorian terraces, but why not build homes that look nice, that people want to live in, that are family homes, with a garden so that people can raise their children? But isn't that something that we do want, homes that look nice? I mean, we're a rich country. We should be able to build some homes that don't look like, horrible old boxes.
Exactly, yeah. Design and architecture is really important. We speak to supporters of house building every day, people that are affected by the housing crisis, like young people stuck in rental accommodation, stuck in temp and substandard accommodation. And if the government want to build the homes at the scale that they're proposing, they need to engage people that actually are going to live in these homes. And I think the arguments about and the narrative around leading with good design is only really going to focus on developers, architects and objectors. They're not focused on the people that actually need
But that said, if you can bring local neighbourhoods with you so people aren't going that carbuncle, as Prince Charles, as he then was famously talked about, an art gallery extension, why does everything modern have to be ugly? We used to build beautiful, beautiful, beautiful terraces. I think that's a start. I mean, it might add a bit of cost, but I don't see why good design has to add cost. I have to say, I never understand why architects design homes that don't look like anything they live in. But in terms of who's going to build them and when they're going to be built, again, they want to sort out the planning, they want to get rid of the NIMBYs. They're still not talking about a spade going in the ground before the next 4 years. And he's saying he wants British workers to do the job. I mean, has he tried getting a builder in the last few years? I mean, I have to say, we don't have that many skilled builders around to build, 100 new towns or a dozen new towns.
Yeah, I think that the most important thing to focus on in the first instance is to get these homes through planning. And I think the way that it's going to do that is to engage the people that are going to want to live in these homes. And the majority of people do support new housing in every area of the UK. And ultimately, people are going to object about new homes, no matter how well designed they may be. It's the future owners and tenants that we need to be involved in.
Well, you've made this point before, and it's so valid that actually, I mean, I'm on an email list from my local council whenever there's any planning applications in nearby. So, if someone wants to lop down a big, beautiful tree that we all enjoy, it's like, well, sorry, you bought the house with the tree. The tree's part of the local amenity. I'm involved in my local community. But not being NIMBY, but like, can we have developments that are suitable to the local area? And I've supported some and opposed to others. But we tend not to hear from the people who don't live there because they can't afford to live there because there aren't any homes to buy. So the voices of the people who are stuck in rental accommodation and not living where they want to live, those voices aren't heard. Is there any way that the government, what's the process for their voices to be heard other than through organisations like yours?
I think we're filling the gap until that happens. The kind of reformation and digital planning hasn't quite gone far enough. I think talking about things that actually matter to people that are affected by the housing crisis is a really good way to start. And Just Build Homes is filling that gap. I've been speaking at committees recently on behalf of local people who support new housing. I think it's just about really communicating with decision makers that there are people in need and we need.
Well, a lot of these houses, I understand, they're looking at, outside London, in the southeast, some of the southwest and everything. And actually that is where there is the big shortage. That's where the demand is. But then you get a lot of people saying, well, you're building on the green belt. Now, I don't have a problem with us building on the green belt. Most of it isn't what people imagine. It's not, beautiful fields and forests. It's just sort of scrubland that, frankly, people need homes. That's more important priority for me. But do we actually know exactly the kind of homes that the people you represent actually want and actually looking for? Because a lot of people might be going, well, I'm buying, a one-bed flat or a studio. That's because all I can afford. But actually, it probably make more sense if they could afford somewhere where they could then start to raise a family in a few years' time. Without then having to pay stamp duty a second time and go through all that cost of moving. But those homes aren't available to them.
Yeah, from the people that I speak to, it's a whole range. Even older people looking to downsize, there's not enough homes to kind of free up the housing ladder in that sense. And to be honest, people support that we speak to all kinds of housing, even housing for the older generation, because there's a recognition that if you free up family homes, people can move up the ladder and get access to the type of housing that they need. Yeah, absolutely. And again, downsizing. My parents all downsized, older age, less to take care of, no longer, needing a big family house. And, it's just the natural way of things, isn't it? Millie Dodd, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much. She's from Just Build Homes, that campaign group. Philip Ingram, this is the issue. I'm a homeowner. I'm guessing you're a homeowner. Is that actually the voices of homeowners are always heard, objecting to things, the bananas, the NIMBYs, don't build anything anywhere. And we don't hear the voices of those who want these homes. Do you think this is a good idea, actually having new towns, but, actually homes that people might actually want to live in places where they want to live? Mind-blowing idea.
I think it is, because I think we're seeing too many new big housing estates being built without the infrastructure around them to turn them into communities.
And ugly things.
And they're ugly. And if you don't have a community, then you're losing out so much. So you need
the schools, you need the shops.
You need the doctors, you need all the facilities.
The railway links or the motorway links so they can get to work.
Having a home is not just about having somewhere where you can go into and just close the door and stay there. It is that home being part of a wider community that can provide that community support. I actually think this is a really good idea.
Yeah, except the amount of time. We just don't build anything in this country anymore, whether it's a nuclear power station, a reservoir, a third runway for an airport. It takes so long to do anything in this country. We've got to get that sorted out.
It does, but I'm from Birmingham, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes going up in brown belt sites, old industrial sites across Birmingham. With the railway station I park in has just had a massive big.
Yeah, but they're high-rise blocks. They're apartment blocks, aren't they?
No. Most of them are houses.
And
most of them are semi-detached houses, and there's some apartments.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so well, as I see, we're just pretty much entirely tiny little apartments. You just think a lot of people, that's not how they want to raise a family. And then we go, we haven't got enough young people. No, because people don't feel they can raise a family because they can't find a home that they can afford to do that. Swings and roundabouts, folks. Look, so much more to talk about. More about Ukraine, of course, coming up. We're going to talk to Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik about what she makes of what Donald Trump and his Defence Secretary have had to say. That's up next. Give us a call. Let us know your thoughts as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much for your company. Whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have your company. Lots of you getting in touch. Promise to get some more calls from you in the next half hour about Ukraine. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have begun talks to end the war in Ukraine 3 years after Russia's invasion. However, in a huge blow to Kyiv, any peace deal is expected to include no NATO membership, as well as Russia keeping the territory they've annexed since 2014. So that's Crimea and indeed much of the Donbass region in the east of the country. Is this really peace in our time, or is this a betrayal of Ukraine? Well, up next we'll be talking to Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik. But I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Texts are charged at the standard network rate. Message charge. Also going to be talking about the madness of our migration policy, with a Nigerian woman who tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in Britain, finally getting granted the right to stay after she joined a terrorist group to boost her claim. So basically, I've joined this terrorist group. I would now be unable to return to Nigeria. I mean, why on earth would we want to have this woman? Plus, we'll be talking about the economics of Reform UK promising to scrap net zero, and not only that, placing a windfall tax on renewable energy firms if they win the next election. Plus, alcohol will be banned at the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia, the ambassador to the UK announced yesterday. Fancy your chances going there? At least in Qatar, they did allow foreigners, people travelling to Qatar, to drink alcohol. But an awful lot of the news today also focused on what is going on in Munich, where earlier this morning a man drove his car into a crowd of people in Munich, leaving at least, now we know, 28 people injured. It is being reported that at least 2 people are critically injured. Local reports claim, these are unconfirmed, but local reports claim that 1 woman has been killed, but we know that children are among those injured. A pram is among the debris strewn on the ground. A police spokesman said earlier that the car drove close to police vehicles and then deliberately drove at civilians just standing in the street. A 24-year-old Afghan man has now been arrested here for that attack, and the Premier of the Bavarian state in Germany has said the car incident is a suspected attack. I mean, yeah, tell us something we don't know. But really horrific story coming out of Munich. We'll keep you up to date on developments there. This, of course, all ahead of next Sunday, not this coming Sunday, the Sunday after's general election in Germany, where the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, right-wing party, looks set to do very well indeed. Philip Ingram, just on the story for Munich, I mean, not joking, but just, usual hear nonsense about, is it a mental health problem? A 24-year-old Afghan man driving his car into a bunch of ordinary people in the street in Munich, and possible deaths, definitely critical injuries. This has become the norm in Germany, and you've got to wonder, not at all, why people are turning to alternative parties.
Well, yes, exactly, and the norm in Germany, and we've seen it in the United States as well. We've seen it here. Using a vehicle as a weapon is something that Al Qaeda, ISIS, on their websites, in their online magazines, have given instructions as to how to do it. They run scorecards on it. Please, nobody search for that, because if you do, counter-terror police will come through your front door. It's illegal to even go and look at these sites.
But they sort of suggest the vehicles to do it with.
Oh, they suggest the vehicles to do it with. They suggest the tactics of how to do reconnaissance against where you're going to do it. If you come across the police, what to do, how to get around barriers and everything else.
Billing a bomb, being a suicide bomber, again, we know that actually there are very few people who might talk a good game on this. There are very few people actually willing to do it. We've seen some horrific attacks, London Bridge, elsewhere, which is where we are right now, of people actually, stabbing, going. Now, using a gun, to a certain extent, you can kill more people easily, more quickly, but also it's rather more sort of distant, less up close with people. It's so easy for someone to take you can go buy a car, you can go and hire a car, to take a car and to do this. Why then, if this is something that they're encouraging, all these different Islamist terrorist groups, why is it not happening more often? I mean, it happens too often, but why is it not happening more often?
Well, it shows that there aren't the numbers of people out there who are being groomed to the point where they are going to go and carry out attacks.
Yeah.
All these terrorist organisations need is one person to do it every now and again, and that's what they target. They're out grooming.
And that's why we have the diversity bollards everywhere to prevent those attacks.
Yeah, the hostile vehicle mitigation.
Hostile vehicle mitigation.
Well, they're more than bollards, so there's lots of different things. They can be planters, they can be walls, they can be bollards, they can be things that you would
didn't
think
need those a few years ago. I wonder why, but there we are. 7 minutes past 12 is the time. Well, one country that's dealing with rather more than that threat right now, is of course Ukraine, after their invasion 3 years ago onto their mainland by Russian forces, valiantly fighting back against pretty much everyone's expectations. Under the leadership of Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine has held on to most of its territory. Lost Crimea in 2014. They've lost large sections of the Donbass region in the east, much of the industrial heartland. But they have kept fighting. They've had the support from Britain, countries in the EU, but most crucially, support from the United States, both militarily and financially, and indeed, one would say, morally as well. However, that looks like that's all about to end. Donald Trump, the new US president, as he said he would do when he was running for office, he said he has spoken for 90 minutes with Vladimir Putin. They've begun talks to end the war in Ukraine. But we hear from his defence secretary, Peter Hegseth, that actually, it won't involve any membership of NATO to protect the Ukrainian territory, and it won't involve a return to pre-2014 borders. So that means all the territory that Russia has seized, they would keep. That's the start of the negotiations. Is that a betrayal of Ukraine? Well, let's put that question to someone who's living it right now. Kira Rudik is Ukrainian MP, leader of the political party Golos, and joins us once again live from Kyiv in Ukraine. Good afternoon to you, Kira.
Hello, Julia, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm vividly remembering speaking to you after you were in your own home, that the windows had been bombed, and your whole home was devastated and covered in glass. And speaking to you right now, after going through that and everything your country and your countrymen and women have gone through, is this a betrayal of Ukraine?
It is indeed very painful. what's going on right now. And, today I have received many requests from Ukrainian people. And the main question that I am unable to answer is that they're asking me is like, what did we do wrong, right? We are doing the right thing. We are fighting for our land, for our people, for really for the values of democracy and freedom. And where did it all go wrong? Yeah. But the good thing is we did not hear the details just yet from what is exactly in the deal. And the most important thing that we didn't hear is who or how will be determined that this deal will stick and will work and Putin will keep his part of the bargain. Because we already has been through that. Since 2014, we had the so-called ceasefire that Russia actually never honored, and we didn't have anyone to pressure them into actually working with that. So these are the questions that we do not have the answers yet.
Yes, because Vladimir Putin famously so trustworthy. That's the issue, isn't it? It seems to me very, very clear. He got the message in 2014 that, you can just take any part of Ukraine you want. So what a surprise. Back in 2022, he came in to seize the rest of Ukraine. The message has gone out loud and clear that the West will help, but only so far. If there is a deal, let's say Russia gets to keep the territory that they've already managed to take control of, there would have to be some sort of international guarantee of at least preventing Russia from encroaching any further. But would you trust that guarantee, given that the Minsk Treaty, basically, America and the US, so America and the UK, and Russia, vowed to protect Ukraine's sovereign national borders, and they clearly have not been protected. Would you trust anything that the West says now?
Well, of course, there would be some ways of ensuring the security, but you are absolutely right. In the current situation, can you actually trust the promises that you are being given? Because the main question about these promises would be whoever makes the security guarantees for Ukraine needs to make sure that they are able to go ahead with whatever happens if Russia breaks their part of the deal. And right now, because the war is so different, it's the war of missiles and drones, where it will be incredibly hard to say who launched those drones, etc. We know for sure that Russia will break any kind of the peace deal. And then what's going to happen? And then who is going to do what? And I don't think that Donald Trump still has anything in mind to solve this. And I don't know if our European allies ready to accept this responsibility. Because I think, Julia, we have been talking with you so many times, and I'm so grateful for your support and for all people in Britain's support. The question still is there, is Europe ready to accept this responsibility, like providing Ukraine? And then what would happen if we actually lose this war? I think we're not talking enough about that.
No, and I don't think a lot of European leaders want to face up to it. I don't know, they haven't got the defence capability, a lot of them. It's very noticeable in terms of percentage of GDP being spent on military. It's the countries that actually have got a border with Russia that have been doing that for quite some time, very wisely. There's a reason why, Poland spends that money, why the Baltic states spend that money. It's a reason why Finland doesn't go to war with other countries, but Finland, for some reason, has a reserve army of 250,000 trained people. I wonder why they do that. All the countries that have been invaded by Russia in the past still have a border with Russia. They get it because they've lived it. Now you're living it. In terms of the details, in terms of territory, an awful lot of the land that Russia has seized is your industrial heartland. Vital for the economy of Ukraine. But they've also taken not just land, they've also taken Ukrainian children, have they not? Along with the people they have massacred, the women they have raped, the people they have tortured and abducted as well. But the children have actually been abducted to Russia, have they not?
Absolutely, Julia, and this is one of the most painful subjects of this war, if you can define what's the most painful, right? But it's also something that the international community was able to confirm precisely, and this is why the ICC, whose efficiency we may be questioning, but actually they have issued the order on the warrant for Putin's arrest, specifically because of that. So then the question is are we getting our children back? Or are they becoming Russians? And and then we'll be trained like to fight against Ukraine, or what's going to happen then? And so right now there are so many things that are unclear, but of course the tendency is not good for Ukraine. And I wonder when we will hear the statement from our European allies, like what's on the table for them and like what is their position, because we are grateful for the position that nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. We have heard it today, but I think when talking to Donald Trump, we need something more bold, I would say.
Yeah.
Something more something that would show the leadership, something that would show that you will that you will not back down. Well, in my heart, I know that you will not, but we need in the United States to hear that as well.
Well, that's it. Some people pointing out, we had lots of calls on this, that actually, and John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has, I think quite rightly said there can't be any talks about the ending this war without Ukraine in the room, without Zelensky in the room, with Putin and Donald Trump. But also just crucially, Ukraine has to agree to this, because the war doesn't end if Ukraine doesn't agree that the war ends, because your people have valiantly fought for your nation state, for your people, for your homeland, and you'd have done it whether you got the help that you got or you did not. Realistically, will most Ukrainians go? I've seen some polling suggest lots of Ukrainians, they're war weary. People are dying. They want to go back to normal life. But would most Ukrainians say, we're willing to give up territory to get a normal life back, to get peace back, and to get our men back from the front line?
I think, Julia, it will solely depend on how well we will believe that the promise of this peace is real. Right. That is not some like time off for Russia to regain their funds after the sanctions will be lifted. And to train more soldiers and then to attack us again. And again, right now in the all the statements by the world leaders, we hear everything but the answer to this particular question.
Yeah. That's going to be the key. And have you been surprised? Because it's one of the things that I'm utterly perplexed by, because I thought Donald Trump, if elected, he'd be really strong on Israel. There's been none of this sort of, on one side, on the other side. No, it's backing Israel 100%. Why do you think there are so many people who support Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself and his team, that they are so strong on Israel's sort of, sovereign nation-state integrity, but not on Ukraine's? They seem, when on lots of ways you could argue that Ukraine is a much more clear-cut case, a democratic national state being invaded by a foreign military power. It's absolutely cut and dried, really obvious whose side we should be on. Morally, economically, geographically, security-wise. Why do you think Donald Trump and so many other people are supportive of Israel but not willing to give the same level of support to Ukraine?
So Donald Trump and his team made it very clear, even before the elections, that the main the policy item for them would be to make sure that China, a key adversary of the United States, will not have the productive unity with Russia and will not be in the military alliance, and that they will be working closely on making sure that that wouldn't happen. And it seems that Ukraine right now falls as a part of this geopolitical idea of trying to to break those ties that China has with Russia, to weaken both. And for that, they are ready to sacrifice some of the positions that include supporting Ukraine. Again, let's hear what does J.D. Vance have to say on the Munich conference, but I can tell you one thing. The Munich agreement in 1938 did not work, and we hope that this mistake would not be repeated in Munich in 25.
Absolutely. Kira Roddick, honestly, my heart goes out to you. We've spoken so many times over the last few years. I am so ashamed of this betrayal by the West of our allies in Ukraine. I really am ashamed. I think we will rue the day. We will rue the day. Kira Roddick, Ukrainian MP, leader of the political party Golos, live for us in Kyiv in Ukraine. Philip Ingram, what do you make?
Kira brings, a degree of reality and common sense to the whole thing. There's a lot more to go around this. It is hugely more complex. She mentioned Trump's position with regard to China. This is the links geopolitically across the globe, across everything that are going on, are huge.
Well, we've had North Koreans fighting in Ukraine.
And the other thing that we haven't quite looked at today is I can see the Americans are pushing the UK to take a greater leadership role in this. That's why John Healey was chairing the contact group for our Defence Secretary, chairing the Ukraine contact group yesterday, and everything else. Our government needs to wake up to the fact that their plan for 2.5% in the Strategic Defence Review is now the situation has changed completely. In military planning terms, that's the one question you ask. If it has changed, you then change the plan. We're going to need to go to more.
But we understand, I mean, it's exclusive a report here at Talk TV today that actually the original Strategic Defence Plan did actually talk about raising spending to 3.5% of GDP, and that was immediately like, no, go back, start again, it's 2.5%.
Yeah, no, what happened was I'd called out and said that a contact of mine who's very close to the Strategic Defence Review team had said that they'd looked at 3.5%, they'd recommended that and told to go back and look at it. The MOD came out when asked by the Talk team, had this happened, and the MOD said, no, couldn't have done. We've said in the terms and conditions for the review, 2.5% was the target. The Talk team then went back to them again and said, given what Donald Trump's been saying, what Donald Tusk's been saying about 3%, 5% and otherwise, has the direction to the Strategic Defence Review team changed? And the MOD came back to the Talk team and said, no, it hasn't. It's still 2.5%. We're not changing the goalposts. That's all we're working to.
Very interesting.
It's flawed.
It's fundamentally, indeed. 12:21 is the time. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let's get to your calls in just a couple of moments. We'll take a quick break. Then I want to hear from you, particularly on Ukraine or indeed on any of the topics we're talking about, including, by the way, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor's CV. Turns out yet more porkies on it. And question marks now about her expense accounts as well. And on what basis was she asked to leave the bank, or did she choose to leave? Lots of questions. I genuinely can't see how she stays in a job at this point, but there we are. That could be a good news story, everyone. Give us a call. Let me know. Have you ever lied on your CV? Did they find out what happened? Because normally you get sacked, don't you? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Grown up in Birmingham, I've lived in Birmingham pretty much my whole life, and when you're paying more and getting less, it's not exactly the ideal time to be putting up all the councillors' allowances. Although it might surprise you that I do actually sympathise with John Cotton's point about getting more people to be able to afford to be councillors, because long term, I mean, no one's going to vote for having higher pay for any politician, but longer term it could be that we just end up with a bunch of students and a bunch of retired people as the only people who become councillors. But I don't think it's the right move to be sticking up your allowances at this time.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:25 is the time. Just to remind you that breaking news this morning about a car attack in Munich. We now know some 28 people injured, 2 critically. Reports locally, although not confirmed, suggest that a woman has died. We know that children among those injured, a pram among the debris, when a man now identified as a 24-year-old Afghan drove his car deliberately into pedestrians. He has been apprehended by police, and what a surprise. Authorities there are now saying this was a suspected attack, not something by accident. No, funny that, isn't it? Anyway, let's go to your phone calls, though, coming in about Ukraine. Chris is in Watford. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Julia. Hi. Yeah, so the reason I was calling, firstly, a couple of things. Crimea is ethnically Russian, so the invasion wasn't really an invasion. Basically, the army of Crimea were all ethnic Russian. And when they had the referendum, they basically just changed sides, and actually most of the people in Crimea were ethnically Russian.
Well, yeah, okay. Crimea is ethnically Russian, but nevertheless, it is Ukrainian territory. You don't just get to decide. Can I just bring?
The army just changed sides.
Because can I just bring in Philip on that? Philip Ingram.
Well, the Kursk region is ethnically Ukrainian, so there was internationally
that's Russia.
That's in Russia, and that's where Ukraine has invaded Russia and captured some of the Kursk territory. So you can't go on the ethnicity of the people that are there. You have to go on the internationally recognised borders.
But also, again, in the Donbass region, Russia deliberately sort of encouraged its citizens to go and live there, to then create. And they're doing the same in the Baltic states as well, to actually create a larger Russian-speaking, Russian ethnic population. But anyway, I thought we didn't care about ethnicity in this country. We don't. Diversity is our strength.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was which hasn't been talked about. I mean, obviously, I think we've talked about this before. Actually, I think on another call, that the Minsk agreement quite clearly part of that agreement, and it was with Russia, was that NATO was going to never let Ukraine join, and that was an agreement which was broken by NATO, and therefore.
It wasn't because Ukraine's not in NATO.
No, I know, but that was the agreement with.
Yes, but it wasn't broken, was it?
Well, yeah, it was because basically then Ukraine started building NATO bases in it.
No, they didn't. Yeah. There aren't NATO bases in Ukraine.
There are NATO bases. They called them training bases, but they're effectively military bases with military in it.
Sorry.
So that's just not true.
Chris, I'm sorry, mate. Again, a lot of people spending way too much time on the internet and looking at the wrong stuff. Honestly, mate, I'm sorry. The agreement was broken in 2 ways. 1, by Russia invading Ukraine, and 2, by the abject failure, and we're about to see if US and the UK to fail to actually protect those borders that we vowed to maintain. I mean, honestly, this is. I mean, I think this is abject nonsense, and these are Kremlin talking points.
Yes, they are very much so. There were training forces from different nations inside Ukraine, helping the Ukrainian military, as we have in lots of countries around the world, but they were not NATO bases. They were on bilateral agreements from different countries, and they weren't a sovereign base of that country. And, this is usual.
In no way was Ukraine a threat to Russia when Russia decided to invade. No. Chris, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go to Paul, who's in Portsmouth. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Julia, and hi, Phil.
Hi, Paul.
Hi there. I think Phil will know this as well. If we look at history itself and the lessons from history, when we go back before the start of the Second World War, when then the so-called European alliance then literally negotiated and handed over Czechoslovakia to the Nazis to appease Hitler. This is what happens when you negotiate with the devil. And I'm sorry, Julia, we have got to be in a position of power or anything like that regarding what we hold over Putin and what we hold over Russia before we can negotiate anything with that man.
Yeah, well, again, so what do you think should happen? What should Donald Trump be saying to Vladimir Putin, and what should we do in response?
I think, like I said, I think Phil will agree when we talk about we negotiate from a power, from a position of strength, is that he tells Putin about what he will do and how he would arm Ukraine and how we will back Ukraine with the European, whether it's NATO or whatever it is, we must be in a position of power that there is a threat there that he knows, and hopefully we'll get from the Trump that this is something genuine. This is something that he will, as he's done so far since he's come as president, he will follow through and he will put things in place to strengthen the Ukraine position and to put us in a better negotiating position.
I mean, again, but that's the reality is, even if they said, OK, you can keep Crimea and all the rest, what's to stop Vladimir Putin, as Kira Rudik said, regrouping, rebuilding his forces and coming back in 5 years' time? He views his Russian soldiers as just cannon fodder. He doesn't care how many of them are blown apart. He really doesn't care. It's quite true. What do you make, by the way? We've had a number of calls today, like Chris and others, who were just saying, well, look, this part is ethnically Russian, or the agreement was broken by Ukraine. And there always seem to be these justifications for why it was perfectly reasonable for Russia to have invaded.
All right, so if they invaded Scotland, if they invaded Wales, then we just turn around and say, well, the most Welsh people speaking, so it's just that's fine. The same with Scotland. What's utter nonsense? Okay, this is a sovereign land, belong to a democratic sovereign country that's been invaded. So, right, under international law, they should be. I mean,
not even under international law. It's actually, again, we've actually signed that Minsk agreement, but we are duty bound, I believe. Don't sign agreements to back to help a country if you're not willing to do it. Because I've got big question marks about whether, if Putin attacked a NATO country, whether we would actually go to help them now. I genuinely am worried that Donald Trump wouldn't, and that we don't have the wherewithal. Where do you think this ends? If there is this deal, and Russia gets pretty much what Vladimir Putin's got right now, where do you think this ends?
I think you're right, Julia. I think, like you say, what is the deal? I think the deal will dictate everything, again, about what Putin gets. Because, again, if you give a bully an inch, then we know he's going to take more than an inch, isn't he? So
absolutely,
I think it's going to empower him if the deal comes more on his side and it's better on him than it does for us.
Absolutely, my concern too. Paul, thank you very much indeed for that. It's Paul in Portsmouth. 0344 499 1000. It's a number to call. Lots more calls. We'll try and get another one in before the top of the hour. Time now, though, to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning 25 grand.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Good luck, everybody. 12:32 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Lots more to talk about, including a ban on booze. Everyone drinking booze at the Saudi World Cup. Would you go along? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very big welcome back. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:35 is the time. Philip Ingram is still here. Mark Littlewood has joined us. He's the Director of Popular Conservatism. Very nice to see you. It's been a long time.
To see you, Julia.
Lots to talk about. Can we start with GDP?
Yeah.
Because it's brilliant. We're not in recession. Are you cheering? Are you celebrating all afternoon?
The champagne's been popping all morning when I heard those figures. I mean,
0.1% growth in the final quarter of the year, in case you're wondering.
These figures are pretty dire. And, Julia, everybody gets really uptight about whether we're just above 0% or just below 0%. Truth is, of course, GDP, national income, is going down per capita. So we measure the whole country. But if you bring in 700,000 people every year, your total GDP will go up, but not on average. So the average person is getting poorer.
I think you'll find, if you check what everyone's been saying for the last 20 years, that every single arrival in this country adds to our economy, and they are net contributors. Oh, no, it turns out all those figures were wrong.
Exactly. Those figures are definitely wrong.
Did they know they were wrong, do you think?
Well, and it might be, dynamics change, right? So it might be that there was a time some time ago where we needed an influx of labour, but that isn't true every year between now and eternity.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt.
And it does depend where they come from. Big fan of French bankers and German bankers
American
coming over
brain
here.
surgeons, that's pretty good as well. But as a cohort, they are definitely net beneficiaries from government spending, not net contributors. Not all of them. You know, those numbers will include some people who've come over to play Premier League football. They'll be net contributors. But as a cohort, they are taking from the exchequer, not giving to it.
Let's talk about the issue of people who do come here and do get to stay here. We've had an array of extraordinary stories in the last week about people who've not been able to stay here. Today we've got a Nigerian woman. She's been able to stay in the country on her 8th attempt at staying in this country as an asylum seeker, because coming from Nigeria, basically kept being rejected. Why she wasn't sent home immediately after the first rejection, you've got to wonder, although not surprised. And then basically she was advised to join a terror group, a particularly prescribed group, not prescribed in this country, prescribed there, and therefore you won't be able to be returned home because you'd be targeted for that. And she managed to stay. Unbelievable. We had an Albanian who couldn't be deported because his young son apparently was a bit fussy about food and wouldn't like foreign chicken nuggets. How they would know that is fascinating. I don't know. We've also had a Pakistani man convicted of child sex offences, not living with his own children, what with being a paedophile, a part of a grooming gang, but not being able to be returned to Pakistan because apparently this would be unduly harsh on his children that he wasn't allowed to live with anyway. We've also had a Gazan family, mum, dad, 4 kids, being told, according to the senior tribunal, senior tier of the refugee tribunals, that they can come and live here under the auspices of the Ukraine family scheme, even though they're coming from Gaza under exceptional circumstances, being that their home has been destroyed, which is pretty much everyone of the population of Gaza. These stories, I'm just reeling those off. That's just this week's stories, Mark. What is going on and what do we do about it?
OK, well, it is bananas, isn't it? I mean, it is absolutely ludicrous. The idea that the preferences of your kid over what type of chicken nuggets and sauce he likes with them is in any way relevant to an asylum claim is bizarre. And this Nigerian one, I mean, this is unbelievable, right? The message now is if you're a bit worried you might be kicked out, then the best thing you can do is to join some fanatical, loony, extremist pseudo-terror group to then say that if I'm sent home, I'll be unfairly persecuted. The judge in that case even accepted she was not sincere in joining that group. It wasn't a reflection of her true beliefs.
But even if she had, on both counts, sincere or insincere, still don't want you here.
I agree. And here's the problem, I think. It does come down to our human rights legislation. In particular, I mean, I would get us out of the European Convention of Human Rights and repeal the Human Rights Act. But in particular, it doesn't apply to all of these cases, is Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. This says that you should have respect for your privacy and a family life. Well, that sounds nice, but wow, is that vague. And if you allow judges to interpret that, and they start thinking your right to a family life is one in which your son can eat whatever flavour of chicken McNuggets he likes, then suddenly you stay. So politicians, if they're not going to scrap the whole ECHR and the
we have to get rid of that one.
You've at least got to clarify that one.
But having read through these articles, there are clearly statements in these articles. There's a further paragraph. It's not just one sentence. When it's except where it is unreasonable interference in your family life, your right to family. That is the issue. Not for instance, if you commit a crime, we absolutely take away your right to a family life by putting you in prison. It seems to me on this basis, if the interpretations of the law continue in this way in this Article 8, we are getting to the point when judges are going to say, I cannot infringe your right to a family life, I cannot put you behind bars even though you've committed murder.
Correct. And my worry is that I would think now, if you wish to be, I don't know, an activist who meaningfully affects British immigration policy, you're probably better off trying to become a judge than trying to become a cabinet minister. We have now allowed our courts to set so much policy, not just in immigration, on things like, can we go drilling in the North Sea, or does that infringe your rights to not die of climate change? So
but that is the legal situation.
Yeah, it is ludicrous. And we have got to get power back into a sovereign parliament so that the immigration rules are set by our MPs who we can vote for or vote out.
And we've even seen that in America. I mean, lots of things that Donald Trump, he's got a clear mandate to do. I mean, again, we've been talking about Ukraine all morning, but he's doing what he said he was going to do. He's got the mandate for it. I disagree with him fundamentally on it. It was my biggest concern about him being elected. Otherwise, I was in favour of lots of what he wanted to do. But again, we've got judges trying to stop him from doing things that he said he was going to do. Can I just bring you up to date the latest news coming out of Munich? And the German city has seen a horrific attack this morning where a Mini Cooper rammed into a group of people in Germany. They were actually protesters from a trade union in Germany's public sector. They were calling for more pay in schools and hospitals. Children among the injured, a pram among the debris. 2 people we know are critically injured out of 28 we know are injured. It has been reported locally, although not confirmed, that a woman has died in that injury. The man who was driving the car was immediately apprehended. He's a 24-year-old Afghan man. News magazine Der Spiegel has identified more about him. They say that he arrived in Germany in 2016. He applied for asylum, having arrived from Afghanistan. His asylum application was rejected, but he was allowed to stay in the country due to the security situation in Afghanistan. He has also posted Islamist content on a social media site before carrying out this attack. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I'm not as au fait with the German immigration system, but I think another part of it, I was just reading, was that he was known to the authorities for a range of offences. Well, I mean, even if you can't at that point deport him for some reason, why isn't he at least incarcerated? So it seems on the face of it, they've got very similar problems to the ones we have here, that there's an inability to deal severely, even when you've got the information. This isn't out of a clear blue sky.
With David Amos, the Tory MP, who was the report yesterday saying that, once again, suspect, the man who was convicted had been a suspect, he'd been on a terror list, and then decided to take him off.
Yeah. Now, I mean, mistakes will happen. We can't expect an organisation like Prevent to be able to catch every single terrorist. I mean, it's a difficult subjective judgment. But it seems to me across the board, we are basically too soft. And the legal system is allowing judges to effectively determine our approach to immigration and asylum, and that needs to be decided by politicians. The politicians might well get it wrong, but you can kick them out.
This is the key. It's one of the reasons why you were a Brexiteer and I was a Brexiteer. I still am because of this. Our popular conservatism, very much associated with Liz Truss and the like. I mean, it's quite interesting to see where we are economically at the moment in terms of borrowing. The 10-year gilt yields and the cost of the Treasury, i.e. you and me, because we're paying for everything as taxpayers of our borrowing in this country. That it is now, it's much higher than it was when Liz Truss had her disastrous budget. Way back when, was it, 2.5 years ago now? And yet Liz Truss is still sort of, being laughed at as, with the lettuce and the mockery, and yet there we are, Rachel Reeves still in the job.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, our case is not to refight the wars of the mini-budget, although I would like taxes to go down, regulation to go down, and spending to be got under control. Our assertion is as follows. that the institutional structure of Britain is now completely broken. We've just touched on immigration, but we've basically handed over fiscal policy to the Office for Budget Responsibility. I keep asking people if anybody can name the head of that office. Do you know who it is?
Right now, no. I did it in a multiple choice.
Richard Hughes. I reckon he has more power over fiscal policy than Rachel Reeves. Now, if you don't rate Rachel Reeves, you might feel quite grateful about that. But nevertheless, at least Rachel Reeves is a democratically elected politician.
But this has been something from Blair onwards, again, even just the independence of the Bank of England, which I never understood. Oh, it's supposed to be the great move. They did it within an hour of getting into office, you know. But this idea, so much stuff is handed over to unelected, unaccountable quangos which are all almost entirely run by kind of basically Blairites.
Yes, that's exactly right. And we see
in
that
every field.
I mean, the Climate Change Committee, enormously powerful. I mean, more powerful than the Environment Secretary. And the idea behind these Blair reforms was a bit sort of, history is over. We've settled all the big questions. Yeah. All we need now is some independent, well-meaning, technocratic experts
who know better than the rest of us.
And that has been a disaster, and we need a big reset.
Well, in terms of reset, I mean, Reform UK is the only major party now, and they are a major party now, even with only 5 MPs. They are making all the running in Parliament. They are leading the stories now. They want to scrap what they call net stupid zero. They also want to even impose a tax on wind farms and solar farms because they've had subsidies for years and just showing it all up. The Tory party, I mean, I think Robert Jenrick, when he was running for leadership, he halfway through he said, he'd been convinced by me, and I went too late. Kemi Badenoch is still arguing for net zero, but just not with the targets we've got. I mean, the Tory party, you are not going to deliver growth if you got into power. We're not going to have, we're not going to be able to be a serious country while we've still got these absurd targets. Until the Tory party, the Conservative party, the popular Conservatives, it's not they drop net zero. It's game over for the Tories, isn't it?
You're right. I mean, you can give the new leader of the party a bit of time. She has some disadvantages compared to Nigel Farage, who comes out of the election with a spring in his step, made a big breakthrough, got parliamentary representation. The Conservatives
also, it's his party.
It's his party. The Tories come out of the election having had an absolute shellacking, worst result in centuries, need to piece it all back together. That will take some time. But I do hope that Kemi Badenoch starts taking some pretty clear positions. She's right that she doesn't need to set out her detailed policy. Exactly what are we going to do on energy policy here or precise tweaks to tax policy there. You don't need to set all that out now. But you can take a position. And I would like the position to be, we're going to leave the ECHR. We are going to abandon the carbon net zero target. Begs loads of questions that you can answer later on, in my view. But you've got to plant a flag in the sand. And I think if the Conservatives do that, well, maybe it will win over some of the supporters of Reform.
And it may have been possible without Reform UK yapping at their heels, or indeed taking over from them in the polls, as they have done, even with Labour. They could have carried on and not had some policy, but with Reform setting that agenda, it's just not an option. Can we come back to Rachel Reeves, though, because yet more revelations today about her CV, particularly on LinkedIn. I hate LinkedIn, I have to say. Basically, how long she spent working at the Bank of England. But, she claimed she was an economist for 10 years at the Bank of England. She was also an economist at Halifax Bank of Scotland, HBOS. She wasn't an economist at HBOS. She wasn't there for as long as she said. She was actually working in a backroom role. Now, she said 10 years at Bank of England. Wasn't 10 years. It turns out we already knew it was less than that. 5.5 years. Now, we were saying earlier, you could, if you worked there for 9 years, you might say I was there a decade. Yeah. 5.5 years and 10 years. Now, she's basically doubled it. She has lied on her CV. There's some big question marks about her departure from both jobs, about whether it was of her own choosing or not. Also, some question marks being raised by a number of different news organisations about her expenses and whether or not she had stuck to rules on expenses and whether this had been an issue with her then employers. If you apply for a job with the CV saying you've done this with this experience or this qualification, and then you subsequently learn that you don't have the experience you said you've had, your employer has every right to sack you, do they not? I mean, should she keep her job?
I think she's certainly got a hell of a lot of questions to answer, right? We don't, obviously, when you become Chancellor of the Exchequer, it's not a typical job application. She did not provide her CV.
We were told she was this former Bank of England economist.
We were. So the key thing is, what did the Prime Minister know? And it does seem a very odd thing to be anything less than honest about. I mean, you're eventually going to get caught if you claim that you've worked somewhere for 10 years and you've barely done half that. 4.5 years, that's quite a missing gap. That's an extraordinary amount of time to be out from. So, yeah, it looks extremely dodgy. As I say, it's not a typical job to apply for, so I want to know what the Prime Minister knew about her qualifications.
Well, the funny thing that may come up. Just finally, up next, we're going to take a quick break, then we're going to be talking about the Saudis. They've got the World Cup in 2034. I know you're a huge footy fan. And they apparently are going to have a full alcohol ban, booze ban. Now, after Qatar, people were worried about that. No, don't worry, fans. There are going to be drinking zones. You, of course, can drink before and after the matches. Nope. The Saudi ambassador has said, nope, there will be no drinking at all. Would you go on that basis?
No.
Because I wouldn't want to go to Saudi Arabia anyway.
Stay at home or do what I do, which is when there's a big football tournament on, go somewhere warm, like Mallorca. I hire a widescreen TV set. I just sit down on a terrace, drink my cheap beer from the supermarket and watch every match. That's the way to do it.
We're all coming this time.
And that's a lot cheaper than going to Saudi Arabia.
That's certainly true. What do you make of it? I mean, listening to all of this Philippine group, let's get you on the important stuff. Would you go to Saudi Arabia to watch the footy if you couldn't have a drink?
I've no interest in football whatsoever.
Oh, you and
even on the television.
You're a rugby man, aren't you?
I'd want to drown myself rather than switch it on.
Well, would you watch a Rugby World Cup if you couldn't have a drink?
No.
Well, there you are then. You see, yeah, so stop your po-faced nonsense there. Meg, thanks you. Mark Littlewood's great to see you. Do come in again soon, Director of Popular Conservatism. Up next, I want to find out what would Jim White from The Telegraph, what would he make of it? He's travelled to lots of World Cups. I have a funny feeling that drink has been partaken of on occasion. We'll talk about that up next. 12:50 is the time. This is Talk.
Donald Trump had 2 goes. He sort of worked out...
The second go seems to be going
over
better
his
than the
first
first
term.
go.
And the second term, he had 3,500 people ready to go. Look at the amount of taxpayer money that's being spunked up against the wall.
Yeah.
They're going to cut that off. They're going to stop it. They're going to make sure that's redirected into what I would call as a vibrant, accountable private sector.
Yeah. One shot.
That's what we need.
4 years. One shot, 4 years. Nigel Farage, is he going to be the Prime Minister, yes or no?
Well, at the moment, he's got every chance of being the Prime Minister. I mean, we're leading the polls and he's leading reform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:53 is the time. Let's talk more about the World Cup. 2034, Saudi Arabia is hosting the World Cup. God knows why. But they basically said alcohol is going to be banned. Of course, it is a dry country. But I think most people had expected that, like Qatar, when they hosted the last World Cup, that actually, well, you know, there'd be booze allowed, wouldn't there? But no, apparently the Saudi ambassador to the UK said that is not the case. So would you want to go? Well, let's talk to Jim White. He's a sports writer at Telegraph who's attended many a World Cup. And Jim, I'm going to guess, had many a pint at them.
Yes, around the world in a pint glass, I think, is the usual thing. Actually, it's funny you mentioned Qatar because obviously similarly an Islamic regime, but they relaxed things and booze was available. Not least, Julia, probably wisely, in the press centre. There was a bar in the press centre.
Keep you lot happy.
And Mark was saying there that, you know, he likes nothing more than watching a big screen with a can of beer in his hand. Well, you could do that in Qatar. Unfortunately, it was Budweiser, which was one of the sponsors.
I remember everyone complaining about that. I loved Mark's idea. Mark Little was just saying, if you just tuned in, that, you know, he just go somewhere warm for a tournament, watch it all, get a big screen and just settle in. But you get part of the fun, but without all the cost. I mean, we know it's very costly to go to these tournaments. I'm amazed that it's not part of the deal when FIFA agrees, you know, for a World Cup. That you know, look, these are some of the things that we would expect, and that FIFA can name their terms. Why would they not have negotiated that?
Not least, Julia, because one of their principal sponsors is a beer company, Budweiser.
Very fair
you
point.
Know, they
a lot of people don't think that is actually beer, though. To be fair.
Well, that's true. It's a sparkling water, but I think you know, large amounts of money go into Gianni Infantino's pockets from this company. It was interesting in Qatar. They were initially, Budweiser were going to have areas around the stadiums, a little kind of zone where you could go and drink. And I remember going a couple of days before the kickoff to one of the stadiums, and they were taking down the fan zone because it had been at the last minute decided that fans weren't going to be allowed to take a drink. So, you know, even there, I'm surprised Budweiser continued with their sponsorship. But yes, I mean, the fact of the matter is that FIFA have sold out everything, their integrity,
souls,
the whole lot. And I think booze is just a part of it.
And it is part of the culture. I mean, I still hate the fact if I go to Wembley, if I go to a concert, I can have a drink in my seat. But if I go to watch a football match, I can't. I mean, it's just like, oh, for goodness sake. Although I think they're trialling it with women's football because, you know, a bit more sedate in terms of the crowds. But it is a part of the football, you know, tournament, you know, feel, isn't it? People drinking. I mean, do you think it's? I mean, lots of people thought that Qatar wouldn't be much fun, and it turned out actually to be fun. Again, I still don't think Qatar or Saudi should be awarded these major tournaments when they're human rights record, but particularly treatment of women and gay people. But do you think they might relent on this?
I don't think they will. I mean, I think that they're in a strong negotiating position because they've put a lot of money into FIFA. And the whole point of this, I find it interesting why these regimes are doing it. They're trying to do it to attract tourism there. Yeah. They're trying to do it to put themselves on the world map as a business-friendly environment. And when you do that with the at the same time saying, well, you can't do the usual things you can do when you come to tournaments, it seems an odd juxtaposition.
They're kind of exposing that they are different, and again, I don't think we should allow them to sort of sports wash their reputations. And I don't want to go to any country where women aren't equal with men. And it seems to me that, you know, put it this way: if it was apartheid South Africa, they wouldn't be awarded the World Cup, but it's okay if it's women and gay people, which is what bothers me. But Jim, we'll have to leave it there. Time's against us. Sports writer at the Telegraph. He, like me, enjoys a beer with his sport, but I mean, Philip, you don't want to watch the sport anyway. You just want to have the beer, but when you have rugby, but without the football.
Well, exactly.
You want a funny shaped ball with your beer.
Yeah, correct. And I wouldn't go to Saudi Arabia anyway. I disagree with a lot of the policies that they
that's
have.
Kind of where I am. I don't think we should go. I think we need to get out of FIFA. I think we need to start our own all the Western nations need to start their own new football organisation. It's mad that we're doing this. Anyway, madness. Ian Collins is here. Would you go on that basis?
No, I wouldn't. I've been to Dubai a couple of times and Abu Dhabi. You can have a drink there in your hotel. I mean, you can't do that in Saudi anyway, can you? It's a pretty dry country, regardless.
I mean, it's not the only thing in the world. I'm just saying, quite like a drink
you
at the
might
end of the
fancy,
day.
a swift libation after a day's football. There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, sometimes before the show. What are you talking about
Sometimes
today?
during.